Welcome, novitiates, and no first reassurance. The secret phrase from the books is Green Emperor, Way Where, Tower Touches, Midday Sun. Just go to the graves outside the Imperial Palace. Wait until midday, and one of the tombs will shine with the location for the shrine. Here you go. Now you don't have to skim through this entire video. About 5 months ago, I went down a rabbit hole of modern, medieval, and ancient occultism, demonology, cult mentalities, and of course, Elder Scrolls lore, and it was all done in the efforts to understand one character, Mankar Camoran. Welcome everyone to another Elder Scrolls deep dive. Today we will be examining the character, the writings, and the beliefs of who I think is the greatest and most enigmatic cultists I have ever encountered in gaming. From conflicting sources about his birth, to the complete lack of sources for his early life, to questions about his race, actual powers, and his beliefs, it's safe to say that everything about this guy is a question mark. But you would never know this if you just played the main quest of Oblivion. In fact, in the main quest of Oblivion, he only shows up twice. We see him once when the champion of Cyrodiil infiltrates the shrine of Mehrunes Dagon, and again when we enter his paradise. He only has 8 minutes of dialogue throughout the entirety of Oblivion, whereas in someone like Martin has more than half an hour of dialogue, and from a surface level, he doesn't say much that is actually interesting. Well, that's where you're all wrong. I have never encountered a more accurate depiction of a cultist in my entire gaming life, and researching the complexities of his character and writings and his similarities with real life cultists has been the most fun I have had researching for Elder Scrolls lore. This video will analyze not only Mankar Camoran but also Mehrunes Dagon, his patron Daedric Prince, and cults devoted to Mehrunes Dagon that existed before the Mythic Dawn, which is Mankar's cult. But before all that, the disclaimer bucket. I know, it's in every video. It exists for a reason though. First of all, and this is a disclaimer I should have given during the Vivek video as well, but this time it's even more so the case that a lot of the real life practices and beliefs that we will be talking about throughout this video count as heresies. A lot of it was thought to have been lost during some mass burnings, until someone dug up a grave and found some of them that survived. Very convenient. Second, these are my conclusions based on my own research. Any research that was made by others that I will reference in this video will be credited beforehand. Third, it is confirmed that some parts of Mankar's character are products of suboptimal game development. This is not an issue. In fact, it's an invitation to elaborate further. And as a final note, unlike the video I've made about Vivek, I can go all the way back until the point Mankar was born. So instead of doing all that again, I will give the information needed when it's needed, to the best of my abilities. For this video, I will be using footage from the original Oblivion. Sure, it might not look the best, but this is a video about Mankar, and I prefer the way he looks in the original rather than the remaster. And to be candid with you, if you can appreciate the timeless beauty of this, I don't think you and I can be friends, except when we are talking about League, because a little known author decided to depict League in a mod they made, and I enjoy supporting obscure content creators. Fun fact, I wasn't gonna release this video until Skyblivion was out, but then I got cooking with some other video ideas for Skyblivion, and now we're here. Stay tuned by the way, and without further ado, I introduce to you a deep dive into Mankar Camoran, the greatest cultist in gaming history.
So, the cat's paw of the Septims arrives at last.
Introduction. I want to tell you a story about a Camoran in this section, but it will not be Mankar. The Camoran dynasty has ruled over Valenwood and beyond since the First Era. In fact, it was the unification of the Bosmer, the Wood of People, under Iplian Camoran that is thought to have led to the changing of a previous era, from the Merithic era to the First Era. A bitter irony that Mankar would seek and end up doing the same, although under different, less noble circumstances. So with a several thousand-year-old history, it's safe to say that although the Camoran dynasty isn't as famous as the Septims or the Remans, it is longer lived and just as impactful as all of them. But this story isn't about the Camorans in general, this is a story about Haemon Camoran. We're in the year 249 of the Third Era. This is the second year of the reign of Emperor Seferus Septim II, and Tamriel is once again about to become a mess. Alongside the beginning of his reign, another struggle for succession emerges in Valenwood. The two main characters here are Cultist Camoran and his high sorcerer Haemon Camoran. Together, they liberated Valenwood from the empire that had ruled it since the reign of Tiber Septim. Cultus and Haemon, however, disagree with each other on many things. Cultus wants to normalize relations with the empire, while Haemon sees the empire as a weak shell of its former self due to its own struggles with succession and wants to invade more lands beyond Valenwood. So in the year 249, he does exactly that. He invades Colovia and sacks the entire city of Kvatch. The Camerons have deep-seated and personal beef with Kvatch.
Kvatch was rebuilt from ruins once before, and she'll do it again.
After that, the relation between Haemon and Cultist Camoran sours, and after more civil infighting, Haemon wins and has all of Valenwood under his command, with Cultus fleeing Valenwood altogether, but he will keep fighting Haemon until Haemon is defeated. It should be noted that although Cultus was the more diplomatic one out of the two, Haemon always had the advantage of numbers on his side, because his army, by and large, consisted of the undead and Daedra. It is largely because of this that Haemon was thought to be the son of a Breton woman and Moloch Ball, something that I find hard to believe and is more likely just a made-up story because of the excessive amount of dealings he made with the Daedra. Chances are he was just a wood elf. This does not matter for the story. What does matter is that from this point onward, after his betrayal of Cultus, Haemon Camoran would be referred to as the Cameron Usurper. In the following years after this, the Usurper continued his conquest, and he ended up conquering a lot of Hammerfell until he reached the Iliac Bay. Now, the events that happen in the Iliac Bay are contradicting, and we're in the prequel to the prequel of the story, so I'm just gonna give you the TLDR. The Usurper's enemies, composed of mainly 4 kingdoms. Together they build a massive fleet at the port of Dwaynen, right here on the map. The Usurper could not match that fleet because, believe it or not, undead and Daedra don't know how to steer ships, so he started replacing them with troops from the conquered territories and Valenwood. Another note, so far the Usurper's forces found no large coordinated resistance, but now an alliance had formed with the aim to stop his conquest and brutality, which brings us to the book, The Refugees. I don't think this book gets praised enough. Granted, it talks about a very small event that no longer matters, but it's written really well, and dare I say, it's a very adults-only book. It mentions a scene where 50-some people in their fleeing of the Cameron Usurper squeezed together in a forgotten cellar beneath a brothel. By the way, most of what has been said already is lore from Daggerfall. This is old stuff. This book, The Refugees, is the newer stuff, and it is the reason, along with the first commentary on the Mysterium Xarxes, why all this backstory was needed and necessary. Now, let us read the story of the Cameron Usurper and the beginning of the story of another Camoran. I'm also gonna skip some parts because the whole story takes about 10 minutes. Mother, a red-guard boy whispered. What was that? The boy's mother was about to answer him when there was another rolling roar from outside, which grew louder and louder, as if some great but incorporeal beast had come to the cellar. The walls trembled and dust burst from the ceiling in a rain of powder. Unlike the last time, no one screamed. They waited until the weird, haunting sound had passed, and then was replaced by the soft rumble of the distant battle. A wounded soldier began whispering Mara's prayers for the doomed. Mankar, he's coming, a Bosmer woman curled up in a cot whispered, her eyes feverish, flesh white and wet with sweat. Who's coming? Asked the boy, grasping his mother's skirt tight. Who do you think, lad? The sweetsmonger? A grizzled, one-armed redguard growled. The Cameron Usurper. The boy's mother shot an angry look at the old warrior. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's sick. The boy nodded. His mother was usually right. He had not yet even been born when people began whispering that the Cameron Usurper was coming towards her little village, and she had packed up her belongings to flee. Their neighbors had laughed at her, she said, saying that Rihad and Deneth would handily defeat him. Lucar's father, who he was never meant to meet, had also laughed at her. It was the harvest time, and she would miss out on the celebrations. But his mother, Mikey, was right. 2 weeks after she fled the village, she heard the tale that it had been obliterated during the night, with no survivors. Rihad and Teneth had both fallen. The Camoran usurper was unstoppable. Now the red sky was on the horizon of the bay. Mankar, the Bosmer woman cried out again. He's coming, and he will bring death. No one is coming, said a pretty young Breton healer, coming to the woman's side. Hush now. The entire Iliac Bay is one great battlefield. Then a scout comes in the cellar and begins talking. We've shut off the invasion from the mouth of the bay, but I was coming from the coast, and the enemy's army is marching over the Hrothgarian mountains. That's where I had my little scuffle. It's not too surprising, moving the flanking from the side while the front line is occupied. It's a play right out of Camoran Cultist's book of tricks the Hard King borrowed. The Hard King? Lucar asked. He had been listening quietly, understanding everything except that. Haemon Camoran, Camoran usurper, Haemon Hard King, they're all the same lad. He's a complicated fellow and needs more than one name. Then Orban says this. Lord Caldos was very adamant about not harming anyone that did not pose a threat. I think the people of Kvarch would disagree with that assessment, said Hizim coldly. That was horrible. The worst thing I have ever seen. Orban said. Caldos wept when he saw what Haemon had done. My master did everything he could to stop it, begging the Hard King to return to Valenwood. But he turned on Caldos, and we fled. We are not your enemy, and we have never been. Caldos could do nothing to prevent the horror that the usurper has brought to the Colovian West and Hammerfell, and he has fought for 15 years to prevent more. The frightening bestial roar passed through the cellar again, even louder than before. The wounded could not help groaning in helpless terror. And what is that, my geese nerd? Another of Camoran Cultist's tricks that the usurper picked up. It is indeed a trick, as a matter of fact, Orban yelled. It's a phantasm he employs to scare people. He had to use fear tactics in the beginning when his power was ascending, and he has to fall back on them now, for his power is waning. That is why it took him 2 years to conquer Valenwood, and another 13 to half conquer Hammerfell. No offense to your Redguards, but it isn't only your battle prowess that has been holding him back. He does not have the support he used to have from his master. The echoing roar increased in intensity before once again falling silent. Mankar, the Bosmer woman groaned. He comes, and he will destroy all. His master? Asked Lucar, but Orban's eyes had gone to the Bosmer woman, curled up in her blood-soaked cot. Who is she? Orban asked Rosena. One of the refugees, of course, from your friendly little war in Valenwood, before you and your Caldos changed sides. The healer replied. I think her name is Callis. By Joffrey, Orban whispered under his breath, limping over to the woman's cot and wiping the sweat and blood-streaked hair from her pallid face. Callis, it's Orban. Do you remember me? How did you get here? Did he hurt you? Mankar, Callis moaned. That's all she says, said Rosanna. I don't know what that it is. Orban frowned. Not the usurper, though she knew him too, very well. She was a favorite of his. His favorites, you, Caldos, her, all seem to turn against him, said Mikey. That is why he will fall, replied Hazim. Armored footfall rang along the ceiling, and the cellar door burst open. It was the captain of Baron Othrock's castle guards. If you want to leave, you'll need to take refuge at Castle Whitemoor. We need help, Rosena called back, but she knew that the guards were needed for defense, not to help carry the sick to safety. And then they go to the castle. Where is Callis? Orban asked. She's not here? Rosena said, looking around. She must have run away. Ran away? But wasn't she injured? It was not a healthy situation, but new mothers can surprise you with what they can do when it's all over. She was pregnant, Orban gasped. Yes, it wasn't such a difficult birth. In the end, she was holding the boy in her arms when I saw her last. She said she had done it herself. She was pregnant, Orban murmured again. The mistress of the Camoran usurper was pregnant. Word quickly spread throughout the castle that the battle was over, and more than that, the war was over. Haemon Camoran's forces had been defeated at sea and in the mountains. The Hard King was dead. Lucar watched down from the battlements into the dark woods that surrounded Dwaynen. He had heard of Callis, and he imagined a desperate woman fleeing with her newborn baby. Callis would have nowhere to go, no one to protect them. She and her boy would be a refugee, just like Mikey and him had been. Reflecting back, he remembered her words. He's coming, and he will bring death. He will destroy all. Luca remembered her eyes. She was sick, but not afraid. Who was this he who was coming if the Camoran usurper was dead. Did she say nothing else? Asked Orban. She told me the baby's name, Rosena replied. Mankar. Callus was never again seen by another human, and it is heavily hinted in Book 1 of the Mythic Dawn commentaries, written by Mankar Camoran, that she, at some point, either abandoned him or at the very least, they were separated in a not very good way, and Mankar has a negative view of her. These concepts of motherhood, cutting away from your ancestry, and even the usurper's actions, his father, are all referenced in the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes. Nothing else is known about Mankar's childhood or even his younger years, other than the things he talks about in the commentaries. His father's lord is probably more like Baal, as he's the only Daedric prince worshipped by necromancers, and who can give someone the powers to raise so many undead for the purpose of conquering Tamriel. Plus, there's the rumor from earlier. As to how Callis knew that her son would cause destruction, that part remains unknown, as Mankar, according to himself, was not born the way we see him in Oblivion. He became this way after reading the Mysterium Xarxes, and then some other stuff happened. Whatever happened that gave her this knowledge will forever be a mystery between her and the usurper himself. Mankar will not reappear in Tamriel until the closing days of the Third Era, but this does raise an interesting question. Is this why Mehrunes Dagon chose him specifically? You see, years ago, during the First Era, an event known as the Cold Harbor Compact took place, in which the god of the Morrowind tribunal, Sothasil, convinced a list of Daedric princes to not invade or manifest themselves on Tamriel unless done so through significant intermediaries. Mehrunes Dagon initially agreed to that compact, but he was also the most outspoken prince against it. So much so, in fact, that a few months after agreeing to the compact, he manifested himself physically on the capital of Morrowind, Mournhold, where he was banished.
Hear me, kin. Of what consequence is an Ash Elf's word? By what artifice does he think to hinder me? A mortal bedecked in gears and springs is immortal still, ever weak, ever kindling for the pyre of my will. So, let the Clockmaker come. I shall sunder his bones, just as I sundered his childhood home.
Was Mankar Camoran Mehrunes Dagon's new attempt at getting around the compact? This certainly could be said, and even more so, because he was the son of a powerful sorcerer. Before we come back to Mankar, we need to talk about his patron god, Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric Prince of Destruction, Ambition, and Change. His domain of Oblivion are the Deadlands. Believe it or not, most Daedric princes of Oblivion don't care or don't want to invade Mundus, which is the mortal realm. Only a few do, and of those that have wanted to invade, most of them have done so for a specific reason, like wanting power or a specific item of power that exists on Mundus. Mehrunes Dagon is nothing like that. He just wants to destroy everything, and I do mean everything. During the events of Battlespire, he would even go as far as to invade other Daedric realms.
Daedra Lord Mehrunes Dagon overran the spire, aided by betrayal.
He was also the patron Daedric prince of Yagran Tharn during the events of the very first Elder Scrolls game, Arena. If there ever was a main bad guy in the Elder Scrolls universe, it would be him. Sorry Dagoth. The key question that we will be coming back to throughout this video when it comes to Dagon is this: why does Mehrunes Dagon want to destroy everything? Before we talk about Mankar's answer, I want to talk about the answer another Dagonite cult gave during the events of the Interagnum. For those of you that don't know, this is the period between the Riemann Empire and the Septim Empire, which you can play in the events of ESO. During that period, a number of events involving Dagon occurred, which I will now summarize. A dynasty called the Longhouse Emperors conquered the throne of Cyrodiil and made bargains with Mehrunes Dagon to ensure their dominion, but in the end, they too fell to a Colovian army led by Varen Galerion right before the events of ESO. However, as it turns out, to Dagon, that was just the sideshow. I'm not gonna recount the events of ESO letter for letter because ESO is terminally incapable of telling people a quick and good story these days, so I will cut to the TLDR. Mehrunes Dagon finds another mortal intermediary called Vandesia. He manifests himself on Nirn, but his high priest is defeated in a climactic battle in which they still haven't fixed the dialogue timings. Blah 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 blah, cue the clapping quest. And this was the event of Blackwood. And oh wait, you mean to tell me that this was just another sideshow of Dagons? How could this be? Apparently, Mehrunes Dagon infused 4 mortals with a spark of his power, so that he may reclaim that power at a later date, which would then give him a bunch of power and bind him to Mundus, at which point he will be able to invade the realm. Yeah, I once paid 50 euros worth of DLCs. And you know what? This would have been fine, but this is also the chapter that they introduced the Seals of Endeavor. So if you're looking for someone to say something good about Blackwood, I'm not that person. And I am mentioning all this because although most of this story is pretty boring, there genuinely are some parts that are worth saying. One of Mehrunes Dagon's names, given to him by Sotha Sil, is Father of Cataclysms. In the Deadlands DLC, we see a catalyst in the form of an actual machine that has the ability to, get this, change the nature of a Daedra. This is the first time we see Dagon, or Dagon's power, being used as a tool of change through destruction. It will not be the last one. Although I talk a lot of smack about ESO's chapter quests, the smaller DLC stories are absolute peak. The deeper I got into the Deadlands story, the better it got. Thank God ZeniMax decided to discontinue them in favor of seasonal slop, but I digress. Later on in this questline, we encounter the man that came up with the catalysts, who is a moth priest called Elegian. It is during this questline that we learn that the catalyst doesn't simply change the nature of the Daedra, it turns them into mindless aspects.
The incarnates we encountered were indeed mindless engines of destruction. The Dromora within no longer thinks. All it knows is power and rage. The power surging through the device carries the tinge of Mehrunes Dagon. It seems it is designed to imbue a Daedra with the energy of a single disaster and transform it into an incarnate.
Interesting, and more interesting than even that is the story of Deadlight. According to the Daedra that know about this place, Deadlight was a Daedric realm that belonged to someone, which is never mentioned, which Dagon conquered, destroyed, and left the realm completely broken.
Mehrunes Dagon chased some long-forgotten enemy to this realm and laid waste to the plane. Then he awarded it to his mortal cultists, and they built a citadel here.
We actually get to go to this place, where we learn even more about the backstory of Deadlight, and much, much more that concerns this video. There is a guy stuck in a piece of glass here. I want to learn what happened to him after this.
Hello, how are you? I am under the water.
There is also a letter here, written by Seldina. Seldina is the High Priestess of the Waking Flame cult, who has been doing Dagon's bidding throughout the entirety of the Blackwood chapter and the Deadlands DLC. This letter mentions that Seldina was instructed by Mehrunes Dagon himself to have a child with one of the Longhouse Emperors, and then turn that child into one of the 4 ambitions that would store the energy of Mehrunes Dagon, as per the whole plan from earlier, to store energy into mortals and then come back to claim it later. Yeah, it's part of that whole thing. In the same room, the testament of High Priestess Seldina can be found, which reads as follows: The Order of the Waking Flame welcomes all who seek to remake their lives. We come to Mehrunes Dagon's service from many lands and different walks of life, and yet in the eyes of the mighty prince, all that we once were is of no importance. Brokenness, failure, disappointment, grief, it matters not. What Lord Dagon teaches us is how to use the things we are given. Allow me to tell you my own story, my novices. This is my testament. When I was young, and it does seem so very long ago, I was abandoned by unworthy parents. I found shelter at the Priory of the Golden Staff, followers of Magnus, god of the sun and great architect. They cared for me and educated me. For a time, I was happy there. The acolytes of the priory taught me of Magnus's grand design for the Mundus, and his disappointment at the flaws introduced into his creation. One old monk even showed me forbidden texts that revealed a darker design. Some of the MNEM once sought a tool to unmake what had been made wrong in order that it could be remade in accordance with the architect's plan. The world was sweet and young in my eyes, and I did not see how it would be any kind of mercy to undo it. Then, in my 16th year, the rich horde of the Black Drake came, bringing his war against High Rock. The rich folk burnt my priory. They slaughtered my brothers and my sisters. By mere chance, I survived, only to be dragged away as captive to the rich folk. For months they kept me, a helpless drudge, in their camp, and I learned the truth of the world's flaw. Suffering is all that awaits us. When the horde finally broke up, my rich captors simply discarded me. They destroyed my home, my family, and made it, so I ran. But I held on to my anger, my thirst for vengeance, and I recalled the story of the MNEM and the tool that could unmake this flawed world. Mehrunes Dagon, Prince of Destruction. I sought out his followers in the Order of the Waking Flame, and I found truth in their teachings that had been hidden from me. Now, I want you to conceptualize this story for a moment. She says that the Horde did all of this, and the leader of the Horde is the Black Drake, whose Patreon god is Mehrunes Dagon. So it seems that the catalyst that made her do all this originates from the very Daedric prince that she would go on to serve. And if that is not poetic irony, I don't know what is. Seldina's answer to the question, why does Mehrunes Dagon want to destroy everything, is this: to fix the flaws that were made in the creation of Mundus. Here we are starting to see why someone would choose to believe in Mehrunes Dagon, though trust me, as we go along, the arguments get more and more compelling. By the way, that child Seldina had with one of the Longhouse Emperors, turns out that child was accompanying the main character of ESO this whole time. We are able to access that child's memory to get a better understanding of how Seldina thinks. By the way, excuse me for the hibbity-hobbities I did while listening to this. I needed to keep my fingers active somehow.
This tapestry, what does it mean?
Mehrunes Dagon stands before Magnus as a weapon of hope. He possesses the power to shatter the mortal world, so it can be remade. But a spark within the world is required to summon Dagon's cleansing fire from oblivion. You, my child, will be that spark.
Mehrunes stands right in front of the sun, ready to fix the flaws of the Aedra and create a better world. After all the flaws of the world are cleansed, the good can return. We end up defeating Seldina, and we also get to kill another one of Mehrunes' minions. This one is called Nokvros, and in the process, we also disable some of the catalysts. There is a lot that happens in these quests, such as this.
Do you feel that? Something's coming. Oh no.
Nokvros underestimated you. You are indeed powerful. For mortals. I remember you, little one. Morikar's whelp. I have plans for you. Your companions, however, are a momentary nuisance. I shall destroy them.
Fall back! We cannot fight Mehrunes Dagon.
Hang on! I'll get us out of here!
We end up defeating Dagon by invading one of his 777 impregnable citadels that house his legions. 777 is a really odd number. No, I don't mean like mathematically. I mean, why specifically 777? I mean, mathematically it is an odd number, but it's kind of strange that they are exactly... You know what? You get what I mean. 3 last things about this questline. First, Aatrox's character is Peak.
The Sunderer of the Seven Skies, and the Warrior of the Floating Wastes. I am Aatrox the Mutilator! And yes, I currently occupy this Daedric body.
Second, we defeat Mehrunes Dagon by learning and then using against him his Egonymic. Keep this idea in mind. We'll come back to the Nimics several times throughout this video, in important ways. And 3. Listen, we have and we will hear a lot about Dagon throughout this video, but that's not Mehrunes Dagon speaking. It will be people speaking on behalf or about Mehrunes Dagon. In our last fight with him, we can actually hear him speak a lot. Let us listen to some of his lines, just to see if he really is that momentous instrument of change.
Do you think you've won? That you could triumph over me? Fools, you have only seen a fraction of my power. This cannot be. Curse you, mortal. I am absolute. Inevitable.
Pay specific attention to this phrase, which he says after one of his followers is defeated.
Arise, Sombren. I still have use of you.
Also, here is this.
No.
We did it! He's gone! Is it really over?
Well done, little mortal.
Ah, Zos. You never fail to disappoint. Did you just defeat Mehrunes Dagon? Here is some generic loot. It seems that for all the intellectual attributes given to Mehrunes Dagon, he neither speaks nor cares about any of that. He isn't just a god who is destructive. He is destruction in the form of a god. Maybe he can bring change. But again, the question arises, what change? Look at his realm. Does this look like Magnus's plans for a perfect Mundus? Or maybe have a look at Deadlight. Is this it? Before we go back and talk about Mankar, we have to talk about the Mysterium Xarxes. I am placing this section here because we already just analyzed Mehrunes' actual character, and because if I added this section into the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes section, that would mean that the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes section will have a section where I commentate on the Mysterium Xarxes, and personally, that's a level of depth that I can't bear to bring into this world. The Mysterium Xarxes is a book written by Mehrunes Dagon himself in his own realm of oblivion, though there is no exact date to when he authored it, and it looks like this. With the events of ESO, 2 additional pages are revealed, which appear like this. Important note, these are the pages that the champion of Citadel and the characters of ESO came to interact with, as Mankar would go on to describe how the pages of this book are supposedly ever-changing. This isn't the entire book, it is only 2 pages that can change. Well, could. The book was destroyed during the events of Oblivion. Only a single page remains, which is located in that one annoying museum in Dawnstar.
That burned paper is all that remains of the fabled Mysterium Xarxes, the blasphemous book written by Mehrunes Dagon himself. It's said that Mankar Camoran used the book to open a portal to a paradise, where all his followers would live forever.
So, what do these 2 pages say? I would like to thank Yinkai Megami, Brawler, Lorus, and Fallen Merc who solved this text back in 2006. The archived version of their post will be in the description, provided by the Imperial Library. Starting with page 1, the whole thing is just a bunch of Daedric letters. Now bear with me because it's kinda all over the place. The letters on the left line connect with the line of letters on the right part of the page to form the following words.
When I walk the earth again, the faithful among you shall receive your reward.
When that sentence ends, it then follows up with a different sentence which picks up from where this one left off and continues on to the upper part of the page and then downwards until the point where the previous sentence begins. And it reads,
To be set above all other mortals forever.
The bottom text connects with the bottom text on page 2 and reads as follows.
As for the rest, the weak shall be winnowed, the timid shall be cast down, the mighty shall tremble at my feet and pray for pardon.
Back to page 1, The letters surrounding the circle say the following: For Lord Dagon, forever reborn in blood and fire from the waters of oblivion. The following gets super technical, so I will quote directly from the archive. The first series of triangles that borders the edge of the circle, starting at 10 o'clock, read Oblivion. The rest of the circle, when we took into account the single red O at the top of the page and the two empty triangles which should contain an O and a Y, plus the single large O in the center of the array, we found the words of bold fire who finds you. Dude, this franchise is awesome. On to page 2. The top line of letters reads, come slow and bring 4 keys. Now once again, there are 4 boxes that go from the left side of the page to the right, which read, in my first arm, a storm, my second, the rush of plagued rain, the third, all the tinder of Anu, and the fourth, the very eyes of Pathom. Now the show keeps going. If the letters and words inside the array are placed in the right order, it shows the following lines, which can also be found in the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes. Master akin to master, mother is miasma to destroyer. The words inside the triangle simply form together to say Mythic Dawn. This confirms what we said already, that the contents of the Mysterium Xarxes can change. The Mythic Dawn was formed centuries after this book was first written. The first page is more of a warning against the enemies of Mehrunes Dagon, and maybe even a prayer for his followers, as we see Mankar residing most of what is written here in the shrine of Mehrunes Dagon. And the second page are the instructions Mankar Camoran would go on to use to make his paradise, and later Martin also used, along with the champion of Cyrodiil, to open a portal to said paradise. There are parts of these writings that we won't encounter again, so I want to talk about them now. Of bold oblivion fire that finds you refers to the ambition that guides one to seek a bargain with Mehrunes Dagon. For Lord Dagon, forever reborn in blood and fire from the waters of oblivion, either refers to him being reborn in his own realm after he's been defeated corporeally, thus his defeats aren't actually defeats, they are more like a to be continued sign. The Mysterium Xarxes is connected to Mehrunes. To merely interact with it causes headaches and strange visions, if you're lucky, that is. We will see what it did to Mankar when we get there, and I think it's been a while since we talked about the actual main guy of this video, so let us get back to talking about him. At some point later on in the 3rd era, Mankar Camoran reappears. He's an elf, so being alive for 200 years isn't that much. But wait, something's off here. His dad was either a wood elf or a Breton. His mother is confirmed to be a wood elf. So why is he a high elf? Is he a high elf? In Oblivion, he's considered an Altmer, high elf, but in the Elder Scrolls Legends, he's a Bosmer and an Altmer. Any discussion about Mankar Camoran from this point onward requires knowledge of his transformation. Let me tell you the contradictions around his character first, before I tell you what's going on here. Once the hero of Kvatch finds the first commentary written by Mankar, he heads to the Mages Guild to find any information about these books and Mankar himself. There the hero can ask a Mage Guild member called Dermina about more information about Mankar, where she says this:
the supposed leader of the Mythic Dawn cult. He wrote the infamous Commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes. The commentaries are contemporary with Tiber's Septim, over 400 years ago, so he is unlikely to still be alive, although you never know.
Contemporary with Tiber Septim. What? Why would she think that? First of all, the commentaries reference events that happened after Tiber Septim's reign, such as the usurper going under the Iliac. The commentaries reference Talos a single time during a book that Dermina does not have access to, but they also reference events that happened 6,000 years ago, and I don't think anyone is saying that he's 6,000 years old. Lastly, Mankar Camoran can wear the Amulet of Kings. How? The main character of Oblivion can wear it. The two people who can wear it are Uriel VII and Martin Septim. Both of these characters are Dragonborns. So, what's going on? Here we have to introduce the main characteristic behind Mankar Camoran. He just wants to be free. This section is essentially the introduction to the commentaries. This man desperately wants to be free. And I want you to ask a question that you've probably never considered. How come Tiber Septim is a Dragonborn? No, really. How did this happen? The covenant that made the first Dragonborn emperors was between Alesia and Akatosh. That one ended when Alesia's son was overthrown by a bunch of fanatics who went by the name the Alesian Order. Then there was the Riemann dynasty, which supposedly began after Riemann's father made love to a hill of mud that looked like Alesia. But what does Tiber Septim have in common with Alesia? Royalty, or the secret syllable of royalty, is something that you would be familiar with if you watched my Vivek video or the 6 Walking Ways video. In the Elder Scrolls franchise, there is the idea of Kim, the secret syllable of royalty. If one person has true understanding of who they are and their place in the universe, and also have a healthy pile of ego, they can change their own nature. People who do so gain something called Numantia, which in Elnafex, the ancestral language of the High Elves that Mankar is very familiar with, it simply means new law. Kim is based on Plato's idea of ideal forms. According to this idea, objects on the physical realm are bound to flaws and are the imperfect counterparts of objects that exist in the realm of ideal forms. Okay, let us look at an example. This is a table. This is also a table. They look nothing alike. Is the term table based on utility, function, shape, or even material of construction? According to Plato, none of the above. The term table is based on a perfect version of the concept called the form, which exists in a realm that transcends the physical. We will come back to this idea with more details later. When we talk about League, the word ideal forms in Mankar's writings is substituted with the word royalty, and it's not only he who uses it like that, but wouldn't you know it, Talos also uses it.
I breathe now in royalty and reshape this land which is mine.
However, when it comes to Mankar, there is an issue here. Chemo royalty, the ideal form, exists both in the universal aspect, as in knowing the ideal form of the world, and in the individual aspect, as in knowing the ideal or true form of oneself. Mankar only possesses the ideal form of himself. He does not possess Kim on the universal one. He is not Talos. He cannot change entire lands. He can only change himself. And we will see in the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes how he did it. What we see in Oblivion is Mankar's ideal form of himself. A ruling king of the world is how Vivek would put it. Royalty, not by the rules of Akatosh, but by his own rules. Just how Talos did it. He is a Dragonborn, or rather, he has the essence of what makes a Dragonborn, well, a Dragonborn. He is royalty, and he did so without Akatosh or Alesia. Not terribly unlike how Talos did it. Though Tiber Septim did eventually earn the blessing of Akatosh. Just as how Hjalti changed his own nature, so did Mankar, but not quite as complete, and without the blessing of Akatosh. Okay, all of this was the confusing part, but it becomes a lot easier when we get into the commentaries, and Mankar explains for himself what happened to him. But what about the race change? A key aspect of Numantia is the returning to your first primal whale, but maintaining your freedom and sense of self. Mankar vehemently hated any restrictions to his freedom. He hates the Aedra for creating the world, and for some other reasons. This is the essence of the Mythic Dawn. The events that solidify the rules of creation happen in the convention above the Adamantine Tower, where the Aedra gathered and decided the rules of Mundus. Mankar managed to return to another state of being before these rules existed, where the limitations of the Aedra no longer exist, and in doing so, becoming unbound by all the flaws of this world. Mankar isn't an Altmer because he has some unique love for Altmer. He's an Altmer because that was the form the first spirits took when they got stuck here after the convention, before several migration waves and disasters made them leave their old homeland, and before the split between elf and human. I have heard it being said that he's more aligned with the Eliots, and although some of his writings do remind me of the Eliots because of how gruesome they can be, yet at the same time flowery in a way, I don't think that's the case. You can now see why he and Seldina were so attracted to a Daedra that promises to undo the world altogether. This is what Mankar's realm, his paradise, represents. His paradise is called
Gaia Alata in the old tongue.
Alara in Latin means winged, and Gaia in Greek means earth. Gaia Alata would probably mean something like winged earth or feathered earth, earth of possibilities, the earth that Mankar believes he lost because of the Aedra and mainly Akatosh. But I'm talking in very general terms, which gets confusing, and a Kotha video can never be confusing, can it now? So what are the specifics? What is the cosmology of the mortal realm, Mundus? According to Mankar, Mankar's beliefs about the mortal realm are revealed to the champion of Cyrodiil during the events of the main quest of Oblivion.
The principalities have sparkled as gems in the black reaches of Oblivion since the first morning. Many are their names and the names of their masters. The cold harbour of Meridia, Periite's quagmire, the 10 moon shadows of Mythala and Dawn's beauty, the princedom of Lorcan, misnamed Tamriel by deluded mortals.
There is much to unpack from this one line in his speech. First of all, he gets the Daedric realms completely wrong. It is with a heavy heart that I must say that this point will not be elaborated upon until the very last line of the very last commentary. Sorry, but there's a bunch of context you have to give in order for everything to make sense properly, and then there's a bunch of other stuff. We will come back to it. Don't you worry about a thing. What about the other claims though?
Tamriel is just one more Daedric realm of Oblivion, long since lost to its prince when he was betrayed by those that served him.
Is Mundus just an Oblivion realm that once belonged to Lorcan? For those of you that don't know the specifics, Mundus is considered to be a separate realm that exists outside Oblivion, the realm of the Daedra, and Aetherius, the realm of the Aedra. The whole thing resembles an egg or a wheel. Mundus is the egg yolk or the center of the wheel. So for this claim to make sense, Lorcan, the deity who conceived the idea to create the mortal realm, must also be a Daedra. So is Lorcan a Daedra? That would actually depend on your definition of Daedra. If you define Daedra as the elves did, meaning not our ancestor, no, Lorcan is 100% an Aedra. He's 100% one of the spirits that created the mortal realm. He definitely gave most of his power to create the world. Thus, he's an ancestor, which is what Aedra means. But I don't think Mankar goes by that definition. Another resource describes the Daedra as the blood of Parome, and this is 100% true for Lorcan. Time and time again, it is stated that he was made by Parome Sithis. So, in this case, it can be said that Mankar is right. Now, is this creation Lorcan's creation specifically?
I don't know. It's complicated.
He is one of its key founders, I'll tell you that much. But is it his any more than Magnus's, who made the plans to create the world, or Auriel's, who created the concept of time for it? You could argue, and Mankar sure does, that yes, actually, Mundus was made both for and by Lorcan. But does the war that resulted from the creation of Mundus count as a betrayal against Lorcan? No, not really. I mean, it might have been, I wasn't there. And even if it was definitely desired by Lorcan to be this way.
This heart is the heart of the world, for one was made to satisfy the other.
For those of you that don't know, after the creation of the world, Lorcan and Auriel had beef, and then Trinimac got involved, and there was some stuff that went on. The TLDR is that Lorcan lost and died. And nowadays, Lorcan's avatars and Akatosh, the Cyrodiilic name for Auriel, seem to be pretty chill. And if anything, Vivek states that Lorcan wanted and was happy with all of this. So this statement doesn't hold up. Is Tamriel located in Oblivion? Well, Oblivion is a series of lesser realms that are separated through barriers. Mundus, in which Tamriel is in, is separated from the other realms through magical barriers created by Akatosh, which is another reason for Mankar to have beef with him. So in this regard as well, it could be said that he has a point, but only in a very technical way. There are barriers that separate the Daedric realms from each other, and there are also barriers separating Tamriel from the other Daedric realms. While we are reading the commentaries, I want you to keep two themes in mind. Mankar often describes horrific scenes in beautiful ways, and 2, he can twist things in ways that are both obvious and hard to exactly pinpoint what is being twisted here. Let me give you an example of this point.
Lord Dagon cannot invade Tamriel, his birthright. He comes to liberate the occupied lands.
Both Lord Khan and Dagon represent change. However, here is the difference. Lord Khan wants change for the sake of ascension. He wants violence and pain for the sake of becoming something better. He is reducing himself in order to elevate himself and also others. This is why he is often called the Scarab. Mehrunes Dagon is just destruction for the sake of it. If you take this concept of destruction as represented by Mehrunes Dagon and warp it in just the right way, it can resemble Lord Khan's efforts. This is why there is such a stark contradiction between Dagon's realm, the Deadlands, and Mankar's paradise. Mankar could make something of Dagon's destruction, but as we already said, Mehrunes Dagon is not a philosopher or a builder. He's just destruction. If he invaded Tamriel, he would just create another Deadlands or another Deadlight. Maybe it can be said that if he were to come, destroy everything, and then leave, something like what Mankar and Seldina talked about could happen. But from merely glimpsing at Dagon, I can probably tell that he isn't exactly the deity to give up on one of his newly conquered domains. So, no, the brands of destruction Lord Khan promotes and Dagon, although they might have some similar characteristics, they aren't the same. And this was the cosmology section. For now, calm now, don't be slacking. The road ahead is still long. Wait until we get to League. But I've rambled long enough. All of this has been the introductory material. We now enter the analysis of the commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes. A few words before the actual commentary on the commentaries. The commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes contain hardly any commentary about the Mysterium Xarxes. You will see as we go along that they contain a lot more about Mankar's beliefs, which are influenced by real-life concepts, which, since we are officially in the commentary part of this video, I'm gonna talk about. Not that I didn't talk about those influences already, but now we are cracking it up to 11. Every single one of these 4 books begin by stating that they are written by Mankar Camoran and then saying that these books are read by initiates to the Mythic Dawn cult, which is stuff that we already know. But then, a single Daedric word is given for each one of the 4 books. The word found on the first text is Dagon. However, it should be noted that in Elnafex, the names of the Daedra adhere to terms that align with them and their traits. Therefore, Dagon might as well mean destruction. I also want to say, I've heard from the Vivek video that listening to the entire book and then having me reread it and analyze it feels kinda redundant. This is done so because if you are a first-time reader of these books and you read them for the first time, you will get lost. This is especially the case because all of these books are overflown with very difficult terms. The first time I read these books, I was beyond lost, especially as we go into the 4th commentary. Don't worry, I'm not gonna do this for the truth in sequence. That one is way simpler. Nevertheless, the die is cast. Let us begin with book 1.
Dude, there are some words in this book I have never even heard of in my life, but here we go. Greetings, novitiate, and know first a reassurance. Mankar Camoran was once like you, asleep, unwise, protonymic. We mortals leave the dreaming sleeve of birth the same, unmantled save for the symbiosis with our mothers, thus to practice and thus to rapprochement, until finally we might through new eyes leave our hearths without need or fear that she remains behind. In this moment we destroy her forever and enter the domain of Lord Dagon. Reader, this book is your door to that domain, and though you be a destroyer, you must still submit to locks. Lord Dagon would only have those clever enough to pause. All else the Orbis claims in their fool running. Walk first. Heed. The impatience you feel is your first slave to behead. Enter as Lord Dagon has written. Come slow and bring 4 keys. Know that then you are royalty, a new breed of destroyer, whose garden shall flood with flowers known and unknown, as it was in the mythic dawn. Thus shall you return to your first primal whale, and yet come out different. It shall this time be neonimbiosis, master akin to master, whose mother is miasma. Every quarter has known us, and none bore our passing except with trembling. Perhaps you came to us through war, or study, or shadow, or the alignment of certain snakes. Though each path matters in its kind, the prize is always thus. Welcome, novitiate. That you are here at all means that you have the worthiness of kings. Seek thy pocket now, and look, there is the first key, glinting with the light of a new dawn. Night follows day, and so know that this primary insight shall fall alike unto the turbulent evening sea, where all faiths are tested. Again, a reassurance. Even the usurper went under the iliac before he rose up to claim his fleet. Fear only for a second. Shaken belief is like water for a purpose. In the Garden of the Dawn, we shall breathe whole realities. Enter, as Lord Dagon has written. Come slow and bring 4 keys. Our order is based on the principles of his mighty razor, novitiate, questing knight, chaplain, and master. Let the evil ones burn in its light as if by the excess of our vision. Then shalt our knowledge go aright. However, recall that your sight is yet narrow, and while you have the invitation, you have not the address. My own summons came through a book Lord Dagon wrote himself in the deserts of rust and wounds. Its name is the Mysterium Xarxes, Aldmaratada aggregate, forefather to the wife of all enigma. Each word is razor-fed and secret, thinner than cataclysms, tarnished like red drink. That I mention it at all is a testament to your new rank, my child. Your name is now cut into its weight. Palace, hut, or cave. You have left all the fog worlds of conception behind. Numantia, liberty, rejoice in the promise of paradise. Endlessly it shall form and reform around you. Deeds as entities, all systems only an hour before they bloom to zero sums, flowering like vestments, divine raiment worn to dance at Lord Dagon's golden feet. In his first arm, a storm. His second, the rush of plagued rain. The third, all the tinder of Anu, and the fourth, the very eyes of Padme. Feel uplifted in thine heart that you have this first key, for it shall strike high and low into the worm-rot of false heavens. Roaring, I wandered until I grew hoarse with gospel. I had read the mysteries of Lord Dagon, and feeling anew, went mad with the overflow. My words found no purchase until I became hidden. These were not words for the common of Tamriel, whose clergy long ago feigned the very existence of the dawn. Learn from my mistake. Know that humility was Mankar Camoran's original wisdom. Come slow and bring 4 keys. Offering myself to that daybreak allowed the girdle of grace to contain me. When my voice returned, it spoke with another tongue. After 3 nights, I could speak fire. Red drink, razor-fed, I had glimpsed the path unto the garden, and knew that to inform the others of its harbor, I had to first drown myself in Search's sea. Know ye that I have found my fleet, and that you are the flagship of my hope. Greetings, novitiate. Mankar Camoran was once you, asleep, unwise, protonymic, but am no more. Now I sit and wait to feast with thee on all the worlds of this cosmos. Numantia, liberty.
Greetings, novitiate, and no first reassurance. Mankar Camoran was once like you, asleep, unwise, protonymic. First, he greets any new potential member to his guild, and then he reassures them that as they are now trying to be like him, he was once like them. It's not that the people of Tamriel aren't aware that this might not be a good guy. Anyone with basic survival skills can tell that Dagon might be dangerous, so by comforting them, he's trying to make them susceptible to his cause. But I do believe, and we will see more of this soon, that he's genuinely trying to comfort them. There is an element of compassion within him for people that were once unaware, just like how he was. But then he uses a term we've never encountered before, protonymic. What does this word mean? The goat himself, Divaith Fear, answers this question in one of his books on the nature of mimics. A Daedra's mimic, or incantatory name, as it is sometimes thought of, is not a mere appellation. A mortal can change their names as easily as donning a new hat. Every day, someone fleeing a vengeful enemy or hoping to start over in a new land adopts a useful alias. Daedra, however, are defined by their true names. They cannot abandon or change them, any more than you cannot abandon your body or dismiss your consciousness. Well, there are ways to do such things, but my point remains. In fact, even when a Daedra's physical form is utterly annihilated, its mimic endures. This might lead you to think of a mimic as a soul of sorts, but that would be a serious misconception. A mortal soul can easily be moved from one housing to another with some rather elementary magic, and a mortal might choose to change their ways, abandoning old desires and take on new ones. An mimic, however, can only be manifested again in its one changeless form. For example, a Daedric prince such as Mehrunes Dagon cannot just choose to stop being a god of destruction. That element of his portfolio defines him for all time. If destroyed, his mimic will eventually reconstitute exactly as he was before. Therefore, a mimic might best be thought as a pattern or formula that defines the being created when it manifests itself from the eternal chaos of oblivion. Now, this is where the subject becomes really interesting. With the right sort of magic, you can edit the pattern, alter the mimic, and you alter the Daedra defined by it. A truly capable mage who learned a Daedra's complete mimic could change its loyalties, limit its power, anchor it to a different physical form, such as an object of some kind, or simply disperse it altogether. Obviously, the more powerful the Daedra and the more complex the mimic, the more difficult it is to carry out such alterations. And that is why all Daedra fear the possibility of an enemy learning their mimic, and why they guard them so preciously. Twice was Mehrunes Dagon defeated by people who used his mimic, once in the Battlespire and once in ESO.
Simply put, a mimic is a Daedra's true name. Some of us have many, others only one. If another knows these secret names, they can wield great power and influence over the Daedra they belong to.
But the story does not end here. There are different mimics for different Daedra. From another book, the first and simplest mimic is the prodonymic. Some scholars believe the prodonymic is a description for kindred or species for creatures who lack the self-awareness to identify themselves as individuals. This seems doubtful, however. Surely, not all Daedrats possess the same name. More sophisticated Daedra possess a neonymic as well as a prodonymic. Creatures such as a Dremora, a Scanfiend, or a Watcher can be checked or angered by the use of their prodonymic alone, but a summoner must also use the creature's neonymic to be certain of banishing it. In addition, many intelligent Daedra also possess tribunimics and hieronymics that indicate the creature's affiliation and its rank. To a Daedra, these are more than mere titles. They are integral parts of a creature's identity. Whether a mortal summoner strictly needs these mimics is a rather murky question, but it's best to assume that one should learn everything that can be learned about a Daedra before one attempts to use its mimic. It is rumored that the Daedric princes possess mimics beyond prodonymics and neonymics. These serve as an additional layer of protection against adversaries who think to compel such a being to do their bidding. If these mimics exist, they are certainly powerful and guarded with extreme care. Funnily enough, during the Battlespire, we learn both Dagon's prodonymic, which is
Lekelaga,
and his neonymic, which is
Jekelaho Debe Efehezebe.
Oh, say it again, Dexter.
Jekelaho Debe Efehezebe.
Okay, now, back to Mankar. Let's have a logical assertion. Mankar thinks that the mortal realm is Daedric. Yes? Therefore, humans are, in essence, Daedric as well. Oh no. Therefore, humans should have names as well. Oh no. Now, you would think that all of this is nonsense, but here is this dialogue from Oblivion.
Everyone here died in the Master's service. As the Master promised, we are now immortal, like the Daedra.
Maybe Mankar isn't 100% correct. Daedric names and mortal names aren't the same, but there is an essence of truth to what he's saying. People can change their nature, and in doing so, they change fundamentally in the cosmos. Isn't this the whole DALAE that Vivek talked about? The idea that every human is aligned to something, and when they die, they align with that thing completely, so they end up either in Oblivion or Aetherius, depending on whom they worshipped. Again, he can twist things, so much so that it's obviously twisted, but it's difficult to elaborate on how it's twisted. The essential part of what he's saying here is that right now, the average human is born prodonymic, basic, and unaware of the nature of the world. I would like to see Mankar in a public forum somewhere going, "Wake up, sheeple, you are all prodonymic to me anyway." We mortals live the dreaming sleeve of birth the same, unmantled, save for the symbiosis with our mothers, thus to practice and thus to rapprochement, until finally we might through new eyes leave our hearths without need or fear that she remains behind. In this moment we destroy her forever and enter the domain of Lord Dagon. I will be as clear as I can. We were never given a clear-cut definition for dreamsleeve. The closest thing we've come to a definition is as follows: a metaphysical mechanism which enables the transportation of souls to their destinations. It is also a physical space to an extent, and it can also be used as a form of long-distance communication between mages. For more information, I made a smaller video on it. What the beginning of this sentence says is that when we mortals first enter this world, we are all the same. Then he mentions something very, very important: the mantle. The mantle in the Elder Scrolls is a source of many headaches. It is often cited as a word used to describe everything a person believes in and what they stand for. Very much like the real-life phrase, "pick up the mantle," because it comes from a real-life story. The most metaphysical implication of the mantle is in its affiliation with the walking way, the mantling, in which one being becomes a dead being by acting as the dead being, and in doing so, they change their nature. Here, however, the way Mankar is using it refers to something not as complicated, but just as impactful for someone. Within this context, symbiosis with our mothers, it refers to the collective desires, traits, and even biases that we inherit from our ancestors. So when he says unmantled save for the symbiosis with our mothers, what he is saying is that mortals are born without a purpose or traits, save for those they are given by their parents. Race, characteristics, sex, even the stuff that they get mentally, such as language and traditions. We gain these things, according to Mankar, not because they are actually inherently useful. Rather, they are used to practice early on in our lives with our parents and be able to coexist with them while we need them. Concepts like ego, language, desire, this is where we get to practice them in a simple form, but eventually we develop beyond them and we leave our homes and our families without the need nor the fear that we left them behind. The moment we do this, we destroy the concept of parenthood as it existed in us when we were children and leave their mantle behind. We enter a new process of individuation. At that moment, we no longer need to follow them. We also have the ability to leave behind any of the traits that they have given us. It is only when that link between ancestry and the individual is broken that we enter the domain of Dagon. Parenthood, or motherhood in the case of Mankar, because he only ever knew his mother, stands for all the traits of the first mantle that we are given. When we are born, we do so with certain characteristics: jealousy, hunger, need to socialize, need for companionship, or even a certain hair color. Did you choose any of this? If this is correct, did you also choose the actions you have taken as a product of possessing these traits and characteristics? No, you didn't. You did so with no actual awareness. If you were Mankar, you could say you were prodonymic. That picking up of those traits and then acting upon them is the mantle that mortals are given on birth, which he symbolizes, again because of his own backstory, with the concept of motherhood. When he says, "we destroy her forever," he means when we ascend above these concepts granted by our parents, we enter the domain of destruction. I would be a fool, however, not to mention the graphic implications of what is being said here. I want to remind you that this guy describes horrific scenarios in flowery and beautiful terms all the time. Did he abandon his mother or did he kill her? We will never know. What we do know is that when his mother was heavily pregnant, she would only say, "He's coming and he will bring death." We also know that his mother, after giving birth to him, left with him and was never heard of since that day. Just more fuel for thought. So, if I had to come up with a TLDR for this paragraph, it would be, we are all born the same, unwise, given only what our parents have given us, but eventually we can gain new traits and leave those concepts behind. And when we do so, we enter the domain of Lord Dagon, as we have now destroyed the mantle that was given to to us at birth. Certainly not an easy part, but I can assure you, on a difficulty scale compared to the rest of the books, these lines only get a 5 out of 10. Reader, this book is your door to that domain, and though you be a destroyer, you must still submit to locks. Lord Dagon would only have those clever enough to pause. All else the Orbis claims in their full running. Walk first. Heed. The impatience you feel is your first slave to behead. Thankfully, these lines are a lot easier. Initially, he tells the reader that these books are their way into the domain of Dagon, which is the domain of destruction, as they too will become destroyers, which is one of the key promises of the Mythic Dawn cult. Although it is a cult to gain the knowledge provided in the commentaries, it is also a hush-hush way to tell the player character to find the secret code by reading the first word of every paragraph. The following lines I find beautiful. Only those who question the world around them can find answers that will lead them down this road. If you're clever enough, you will pause, and you will heed the words of Mankar. Those who keep busying themselves with matters of daily life, or even take everything literally, will be claimed by the world around them. That is the polite way of saying that you will fall to its many, many flaws. Knowledge only comes to those who are patient. The first thing you must defeat is your own impatience. I also want to say that in the same fashion he describes terrible things in beautiful ways, he can also do the opposite. That is describing good things in terrible ways. He could have just said, be patient. If he wanted to be flowery about it, he could have even said, your patience is the first beast that you must tame. But no, that's not enough for him. You must behead the very concept of impatience, as if it were a slave, which, when did beheading slaves become so common that now we use it as a metaphor? Enter as Lord Dagon has written, come slow and bring 4 keys. Know that then you are royalty, a new breed of destroyer, whose garden shall flood with flowers, known and unknown, as it was in the Mythic Dawn. Thus shall you return to your first primal whale, and yet come out different. It shall this time be Neonimbiosis, master akin to master, whose mother is Miasma. Mankar does this all throughout the commentaries, where he quotes stuff from the Mysterium Xarxes. However, only some of those things are actually in the 2 pages that we have analyzed. For example, here you could argue that this is a reference to some of the stuff we have seen from the 2 pages, or maybe in one of the other pages that we didn't have access to. But as we will see later on, he mentions stuff that he might just be making up himself in order to trick people to join his cause. I'm just gonna fast forward just a bit so you can see what I'm talking about. Later on, he says, your coming was foretold, my brother, by the Lord Dagon in his Book of Razors. No way in hell, no way in the Deadlands, that this guy cares enough about any mortal so much as to write them down or alter the contents of his sacred book to mention their arrival into a cult that worships him. I think that in some cases, he's just trying to hype people up. After that, he again tells us what he told us in the last paragraph, where he tells people in an indirect way to find all 4 of the keys, the books, in order to then find the secret location of the Mehrunes Dagon shrine. Then he tells us his perception of what royalty is. And again, royalty stands for people who possess Kim to at least some extent. This means knowing who you are and your place in the world and your ideal form. But here, Mankar gives his own spin on it, calling these people a new breed of destroyer. But it makes perfect sense. If you want to transcend above your previous self and the restrictions of the world around you, in doing that, you're gonna have to destroy those images, and in doing so, give birth to nuance, known and unknown, as it was in those days before the restrictions of the mortal realm were introduced by the Aedra. Here he also describes his own transformation. You shall return to your first primal whale and yet come out different when you destroy everything that restricts you, the world around you, your own perception of self, the very things given to you by your parents. Then you will become a new person. The ideas that make you, well, you, will stay the same, and if anything, those ideas will override the restrictions of the mortal world and the mantle given to you by your parents. Mankar did not lose his ideas of wanting to be free, nor did he forget who his father or mother were. The following line confirmed this. Neonimbiosis, as a term, requires some analysis. Neo means new. Nim, as we said already, just means name, and biosis means to live or to live with someone else together. So this term means to live together with your new name, or something like that. Notice how in the phrase master akin to master, one master is not capitalized, but the other one is. After neonimbiosis, terms you thought you knew when you were protonymic gain new meaning, as the old terms, or rather the understanding you possess of those old terms, become shallow or even undesirable. It can also mean that, much like he is a master, as the members of the Mythic Dawn cult refer to him by that title, those members will also be the masters to others, just like him, but still there is only one capitalized master, and that's him. I love this duality of terms, as if there are two different masters, and you have to figure which one's which. Yeah, it can possibly be a product of me overthinking stuff, but I like it. Either way, those primordial traits given by one's ancestors will be foul to the Destroyer. They will be miasma. It's either that, or he's trying once again to hint at how he hated his mother, describing her as miasma. The word mother is capitalized, so I don't think so. I think he's talking about motherhood in general. Every quarter has known us, and none but our passing, except with trembling. Perhaps you came to us through war, or study, or shadow, or the alignment of certain snakes. This is a pretty basic line. It just says that the Mythic Dawn causes destruction, no matter who you are. War, study, or shadow, or the alignment of certain snakes, refer to the warrior, mage, thief, and serpent constellation in the night sky. That doesn't mean that the Mythic Dawn is reaching for the stars. It means no matter what your path in life was or is, the Mythic Dawn is here for you, and it will affect you, and everyone can join it. The following lines elaborate on this. Though each path matters in its kind, the prize is always thus. Welcome, novitiate. That you are here at all means that you have the worthiness of kings. Seek thy pocket now, and look, here is the first key, glinting with the light of a new dawn. The price of joining the Mythic Dawn and accepting Mankar's teachings means that you too can become a king, royalty. The fact that you are reading these pages means that you at least have the potential to be one. You too can be royalty, both in the metaphysical aspects and in that, when it's all said and done, Dagon promises that his followers will be set higher than the rest. There's nothing else worth commenting here, so let's go to the next line. Night follows day, and so know that this primary insight shall fall alike onto the turbulent evening sea, where all faiths are tested. Again, a reassurance. Even the usurper went under the iliac before he rose up to claim his fleet. Fear only for a second. Shaken belief is like water for a purpose. In the garden of the dawn, we shall breathe whole realities. The insights Mankar gives his followers will be challenged by the world at large. He makes a very poetic allegory here, saying, from what I understand, that the collective thoughts of mortals, in their totality, resemble a sea. What Mankar is doing is placing new thoughts and beliefs in the minds of people. Those thoughts will change their faith and will clash with the faith of the rest of Tamriel. They will be tested. But that is a good thing. In fact, it's a reassurance. That's the point of destruction. Clashing with the ideas of other people is an essential part in the evolution of thought. Even the usurper, his dad, had to rethink his tactics before he realized that depending on Daedra and the undead wasn't enough. So he changed them for actual people so he can get his own fleet. Poetic irony that Mankar uses this as something necessary for improvement when we all know that, despite it, the usurper still lost, and so did Mankar. Shaken belief, new thoughts, are like water. They can change shapes with ease, and when we return to the Garden of the Dawn, this new mentality will be an instrument of freedom. With it, we will reshape ourselves and our reality. To him, this is merely the natural progress of things. As night follows day, our order is based on the principles of his mighty razor, novitiate, questing knight, chaplain, and master. Let the evil ones burn in its light, as if by the excess of our vision. Then shall our knowledge go aright. However, recall that your sight is yet narrow, and while you have the invitation, you have not the address. Although all are welcome to the Mythic Dawn, not all are equals. Beginners are novitiates. Then they become questing knights, as they begin to seek the books and perform different tasks to obtain them. Then they become chaplains, and they learn the doctrines of the cult. And finally, they too become masters, just like Mankar. Again, notice how in the following lines he says messed up things in beautiful ways. What he proceeds to say is the stuff we know will kill people, and that is specifically how we know that we are doing it correctly. However, right now, a novitiate is only at the beginning of their journey. We have Mankar's invitation, the first book, but we don't have the address. It's Arius Caverns, near the lake, north of Cheydinhall. It's about a 10-minute run from the city. I did this on a wood elf, so it took me more like 7-ish minutes. Now is when we get to the crispy part. My own summons came through a book Lord Dagon wrote himself in the deserts of Rust and Wounds. Its name is the Mysterium Xarxes, Old Meretada Aggregate, forefather to the wife of all enigma. There is an important question that we haven't talked about yet. Why is it called Mysterium Xarxes? This title seems completely random. In the book Varieties of Faith, it says this about Xarxes. Xarxes is the god of ancestry and secret knowledge. He began as a scribe to Oriel and has kept track of all Altmeri accomplishments, large and small, since the beginning of time. He created his wife, Ogma, from his favorite moments in history. According to another source, he's associated with figures that have something to do with death, like Arche. The book Ogma Infinium was given to Xarxes by Hermeus Mora, the god of forbidden knowledge and secrets. There are two main interpretations to the term the Mysterium Xarxes. It depends on how you define Xarxes. Xarxes stands for secret knowledge from the Altmer's perspective, forgotten ancestries, forgotten past, hidden knowledge, that kind of thing. If we assume that Mysterium just means secret, Mysterium Xarxes either means the secret of Xarxes or the things that were kept a secret from even Xarxes. They both have their own little implications. What does this have to do with Mehrunes Dagon? Why is he using a high elf deity to describe his own book? Remember, he named this book because deities stand for actual concepts. The same is the case with Mora, and as we will see later, Arche. The way Mankar describes Xarxes is also interesting. Alt Meretada Aggregate, meaning part of the totality of the divines of the High Elves. I don't want to confuse people too much with what all of this can mean. It is way too early to get confusing. Hold your breath for commentary 4 for that. I just want to give you a simple interpretation of what I think this means, and you can come to your own conclusions. Xarxes created and married Ogma from his favorite stories. All enigma originates from stuff that were lost in the ages, the stuff that Xarxes recorded, and more importantly, the stuff that Mankar seeks to unveil. All enigma for him originates from stuff he wrote and then was lost to the ages, but for Xarxes it is known because it's the stuff that Xarxes recorded, yet was forever lost to the rest of us, but is still known to him because again he wrote everything down. Mankar seeks to unveil that stuff and return to his first primal whale. Maybe a reference to League, it's also maybe a reference to forgotten history that relates to stuff that supports his cause. I think this is good enough. Moving on. Each word is razor-fed in secret, thinner than cataclysms, tarnished like red drink. That I mentioned it at all is testament to your new rank, my child. Your name is now carrying to its weight. I'm not gonna elaborate on this because it's stuff that I've already talked about. He's telling people that the contents of the Mysterium Xarxes are ever changing, and now that they have entered the path to the Mythic Dawn, they too are in the Mysterium Xarxes. I think that he's lying. Yeah, I think he's just trying to gas people up. But what I do want to question now is this. Why? In this line, he also calls the reader my child. There is compassion to what Mankar is doing. I do believe that. It's just warped and twisted, so much so that it doesn't come through in action. But from simply reading the commentaries and not interacting with Mankar in any other way, you might think otherwise. Palace, hut, or cave, you have left all the folk worlds of conception behind. Numantia, liberty, rejoice in the promise of paradise. Here is where we get to the essence of what Mankar is promising. Numantia means new law, freedom from all the limitations of this world that we are born into. No matter where we are born, no matter where we come from, even if it was a palace, a hut, or a cave, Mankar is saying that we are born into a deeply flawed world, full of suffering, unwanted traits, and limitation. And this is the promise of Mankar. New laws, away from the concepts given to us at birth. Even in death, those who have joined Mankar's cause will be born again in paradise, and one day, hopefully, they will be able to make their own paradise and their own realities. Endlessly, it shall form and reform around you, deeds as entities, all systems only an hour before they bloom to zero sums, flowering like vestments, divine raiment, worn to dance at Lord Dagon's golden feet. The knowledge Mankar gives to the world is one that has to be followed by action. Knowledge alone is not enough. It's also not static. Knowledge of something evolves along with a person that possesses it. Enlightenment is not a straight road. It's not like there is a single revelation that just opens up everything. There are doubts, mistakes, and flaws. But for Numantia, all of these things are supposedly worth it. These actions almost end up getting a sentience of their own. I will elaborate further on this point in the end of this commentary. Here we also see another angle of the zero-sum theory, but this time in a positive light. One thing I've mentioned in past videos, a lot of the terms that we use in the Elder Scrolls franchise first originate from Mankar, and this is one of them. Although the concepts themselves in many cases predate him, a lot of the terms were introduced with him. Zero-sum in here, in reference to these concepts, means understanding and using the concepts Mankar and Dagon bring, so much so that both these ideas and all their protonymic ideas lose their meaning, and in doing so, one ascends above them. Several times in these books, Mankar is completely aware that his pupils might surpass him, and this is the first time that he voices this idea. His main point here is this: Mankar is turning people into destroyers. But what if one day they become such good destroyers that they destroy even what Mankar says? Now, to him this is a good thing. They too must wear the vestments and become masters. Dagon has no golden feet. Gold here symbolizes his divine power and knowledge. A similar statement, golden with wisdom, was once said about Vivek. Then he gives the 4 ingredients with which to create paradise, or a portal to paradise. In his first arm, a storm. The second, the rush of plagued rain. The third, all the tinder of Anu. And the fourth, the very eyes of Padhome. Feel uplifted in thine heart that you have this first key, for it shall strike high and low into the wormrod of false heavens. These are the 4 ingredients that Martin Septem tells the champion of Cyrodiil to find while researching the Mysterium Xarxes. They are the blood of a Daedra, a Daedric artifact, the blood of an Aedra, the armor of Tiber Septem, a greater Welkin stone, and a greater Sigil stone. The order doesn't matter. Martin figured it out, so you don't have to. In this line, we also get our first taste for Mankar's utter hatred for everything Aedric. The false heaven is Aetherius, the humans that die while believing in the Aedra. Go to Aetherius. Aetherius is the false heaven, and according to Mankar, it is rotten and has to be struck down. And then he follows that up with what I think are some of the best lines in this book. Roaring I wandered until I grew hoarse with the gospel. I had read the mysteries of Lord Dagon, and feeling anew when mad with the overflow. My words found no purchase until I became hidden. These were not words for the common of Tamriel, whose clergy long ago feigned the very existence of the dawn. Learn from my mistake. Know that humility was Mankar Camoran's original wisdom. Come slow and bring 4 keys. Mankar is a bad guy, but what he wanted was just for everyone to be free. It is just the case that this pure desire became a twisted obsession. Somehow, he got his hands on the Mysterium Xarxes. Studying the Mysterium Xarxes made him weak, and although he agreed with the book, eventually he lost his voice through a combination of preaching about it and the book making him weak. He read the Xarxes and fell to madness. No one believed his words. No one wanted to hear words of ascension coming from an orphan wood elf. Only when he became hidden did he find followers. But I think it also speaks to his own doubt about what he was reading at the time. It's also interesting, if you read between the lines, Mankar doesn't blame people for not listening to him. He blames the clergy of the Aedra, who insincerely pretended to bring the dawn that he now seeks to bring through Mehrunes Dagon. The people of Tamriel were given false hopes and false meanings by a corrupt clergy that hijacked the very concept of what it means to have fundamental freedom. I want to also mention the obvious irony that Mankar Camoran's god was ultimately defeated by a clergyman and his own god. Despite his past humility, Mankar now advises that such a trait must be left behind. There is no need to go public and preach to the masses in a world that long forgot and twisted the very concept of freedom. Just come slow and bring the 4 books. Offering myself to that daybreak allowed the girdle of grace to contain me. When my voice returned, it spoke with another tongue. After 3 nights, I could speak fire. Here we gain some more information about how Mankar gained Kim. He gave up on trying to fight back the influence of the Mysterium Xarxes, instead focusing on his desire to be free, and then offering himself to destruction. When he did so, he gained his voice back. Remember, it grew hoarse with the gospel during the last paragraph, which means he lost his voice. We will keep seeing this recurring pattern where to gain something, you have to first reduce yourself to gain something more. Now, not only does he get his voice back, but he can also speak in another tongue, Elnafex, and then he became Dragonborn. It is possible that it was Dovazul he learned, but he only speaks in Elnafex, and he never actually spits fire, even when we fight him. I think the whole I could speak fire thing refers to him saying that he became royalty. A royalty such as a Dragonborn. This is the process of gaining Kim. He destroyed his past self and became something new, his ideal form of himself. And the last small paragraph tells us what he wants to do with this new power. Red drink, razor fed. I had glimpsed the path onto the garden and knew that to inform others of its harbor, I had to first drown myself in Xarxes sea. Know ye that I have found my fleet, and that you are the flagship of my hope. Greetings, novitiate. Mankar Camoran was once you, asleep, unwise, prodonymic, but am no more. Now I sit and wait to feast with thee on all the worlds of this cosmos. Numantia, liberty. All he wants now is to tell others about this freedom he gained, and for them to become free like he is. Much like his father abandoned his old army and gained a new fleet, so is he abandoning his old means of doing something, and now he's picking up new ones. In this, the reader he's trying to reach by writing these books are to him what the flagship of the usurper was during his war in the Iliac Bay. Mankar doesn't need novitiates because he needs an army. Well, maybe that's part of the reason, but it's not the main part. The main reason he wants followers is so that people can be free along with him. The main catalyst that drove him to all this, to his preaching, to him gaining a new nature and new law, was that he wanted everyone to be free. Then he greets the reader one last time, which, along with what he says next, circles back to the beginning of the book. But this time, he says that he is no more. He is something else now. The old Mankar Camoran died in his attempts to make everyone free through his teachings of the Mysterium Xarxes, and the new one is in his paradise, his own afterlife, and he waits there to give other people freedom and possibilities they never had under the regime of the Aedra. And this was the end of the first book. Although this is the largest book, I struggle to say that it's the hardest one. In fact, there is a good argument to be made that it's one of the easiest ones to understand. There are some terms that are a bit iffy, but even without this entire commentary, you can get the TLDR from a simple read. This is intentional. In Oblivion, this book is the most accessible one to the masses. It basically serves as an introductory book into the Mythic Dawn, but unfortunately, this simpler storytelling ends quickly in the second sentence of the second book, a book which, in-game, is rarer than the first one. Before we talk about anything else, I have been hiding some stuff from you. Some real-life influences behind everything that was just said. Instead of talking about the real-life influences as we are analyzing the books, I am devoting a section at the end of each book to talk about them here. Hopefully this makes this video less confusing. Oh, but if only hopefully was enough. I'm also not gonna talk about every influence of a book within that book section. Instead, I will attribute the influences across every book where they are the most impactful, in my opinion. I also want to note that I don't actually know what's in the mind of the author that wrote the commentaries, whomever they may be. All I do is find similarities, tie them together with some hints, and make a guess that enables some interesting commentary. If you notice something else that I skipped, let me know in the comments. Enough of that though. The single biggest influence behind the Mysterium Mysterium Xarxes, and the first commentary is the Lesser Key of King Solomon. The Lesser Key of King Solomon is a medieval grimoire composed of 5 other books that talk about Christian and Jewish demonology and angelology. That's the study of angels. The symbols found in the Mysterium Xarxes resemble those found in this grimoire by a lot, but that is just a minor observation. Much like Mehrunes Dagon, the high-ranking demon kings and princes command their own legions, and more than that, every demon has a unique name that is needed to summon them and make them obey to the will of the conjurer. Yes, the Lesser Key of King Solomon is the origin of the name. Ritualistic preparations, like those done to open the portal to paradise, are also inspired by this grimoire. There is also the whole thing of speaking in a certain language to perform an incantation or a word of power that is also stripped straight from here. There is also some stuff here that is inspired by other people who read the Lesser Key and were themselves inspired by it. Yes, I am talking about Aleister Crowley. Hey, you wanna know something funny? When I wrote the Vivek video, I was 100% expecting at least some people to back up Crowley. Nope, everyone basically was throwing spitballs at him. I'm not gonna talk about Crowley again unless Mankar directly quotes him, which to my knowledge he never actually does, but some of the stuff Mankar writes and some of the concepts he talks about are certainly very reminiscent of him. Concepts like freedom, breaking away from your ancestry and hating the clergy, and let everyone know free will and do as they will, and the concept of the new law in particular definitely ring of Crowley a lot. But I digress. The second point I want to focus on is on cult mentality. This one isn't so much focused on a specific real life influence, but instead I want to talk about a real life influence that has been done so well in the character of Mankar that it deserves calling this whole video the greatest cultist in the history of gaming. I love researching cults. I can't tell you which cults I research the most because the number one rule of someone who's in a cult is that they don't know they are in a cult, and furthermore, they most likely will get contrarian when someone calls their cult a cult and not a super happy organization that distributes peace and happiness. Believe it or not, there is not an exact definition of what a cult is. Even the dictionary definition is way too general and lacking. As it says, a relatively small group of people having beliefs or practices, especially relating to religion, that are regarded by others as strange or sinister or as imposing excessive control over the members. There are several methods to identify cults, such as the bite model that seeks to examine the behavior, information, thought, and emotional control the cult places on its members. But everyone knows that even these models, although they are better than nothing, they aren't perfect. Moreover, the term cult is ever-changing. Even Christianity began as a cult in the Roman Empire. The term cult only gained a negative connotation in the late 20th century, between the 50s and the 70s, after stuff like the Jonestown Massacre and the Manson family stuff happened. By the way, cults aren't necessarily death cults or even reclusive cults. A cult can also be a tight community of religious fanatics who believe in one of the popular religions but exert too much pressure and control upon the members of their community. Most cults follow strict hierarchical structures, and of course, don't see it as a hierarchical structure. Most of the time, they mostly see their higher-ups as their teachers or their educators. If the leaders are ordained by some higher power, according to the group, then the hierarchy is a result of that power. The main difference, or at least what should be the main difference, between a cult leader and a spiritual leader is mostly in intent. I'm gonna use Christ as an example, since we already brought up Christianity. According to most tellings of Christ, he never asked anyone for money. He never asked for special treatment. He never coveted anything from his followers, and if he was an opportunist that was in it just for a quick buck, he would have surely folded the moment people started threatening to kill him. Contrast that with a character like actually, there's a lot of people you can apply this to, but I'm gonna use a figure that is unanimously hated. Jim Jones, the leader of the People's Temple, a cult that ran throughout the 60s and 70s and ended in a brutal way in a small town. Jim Jones, as the cult's leader, would ask his female followers for sexual favors. He would go on healing campaigns, and no, this doesn't mean that he made a healer. He would travel in different locations and heal people for a minuscule fee, of course. cross. And contrary to what many of you might think who already know the basics of the story, he himself never drank the Kool-Aid. He only gave it to his followers to drink. Instead, he was found with a gunshot in his head. He didn't believe his own hype. He was a preacher during a time of political and social turmoil. He gave people an alternative and an environment where everyone, independent of gender, race, or ethnicity, were welcomed, and his ego got out of control as a result of people hyping him up as their salvation. And ultimately, all of this got out of control, and a lot of them died.
I think people need to understand that every hour of the day, Jim Jones thought he was a fraud. He knew he was a bad guy. He knew he was a sick guy. He just didn't want anybody else to know.
How does this tie back to the Mythic Dawn? The thing that gets me about Mankar and why I sincerely believe that he's the greatest cultist in gaming is because I genuinely can't tell if he believes his own hype or if he's borderline delusional. Fundamentally, he never asked anything from his followers. Sure, you can say that he had them do his bidding, but compared to how many we saw in the shrine to Mehrunes Dagon, the ones that say killed Uriel were a minority. He genuinely wants the best for his followers, even those who don't know him yet. He calls them his children, and he was truthful in his word. When his followers did die, they really ended up in paradise. But what exactly was that paradise really all about? We find the answer to this question when the champion of Cyrodiil goes through the events of the main quest of Oblivion. There is a diverse pool of perspectives from his followers, ascended immortals as they are called, those who ended up in paradise after dying. Some say that life in paradise is a nightmare.
Everyone here died in the Master's service. As the Master promised, we are now immortal, like the Daedra. But our life here is a nightmare. The creatures of the garden torment us endlessly. When they kill us, we are soon reborn and the cycle begins again. No one has yet found a way to leave the garden, except those few given the bands of the Chosen and allowed to enter the Forbidden Grotto.
Others are enthusiastic, claiming that their final victory is close.
You? How can you be here? No matter. You are too late to stop Lord Dagon's victory. Soon we will return to Tamriel to rule over it as lords, while you will remain here in the Eternal Garden forever.
Only those who have the bands of the Chosen are allowed to leave. It seems that some of Mankar's destroyers are more favored than others, so you would think that the Forbidden Grotto is better than the actual Garden of the Paradise. But it's not. It's way worse. There are cages with people getting tortured, Daedra tormenting people, and shrines full of blood. And that is not human blood. Even Eldamil, the elf that helps the champion escape the grotto, calls the people here prisoners. But when we analyze the dialogue with Eldamil a bit more, the plot begins to thicken.
I've had plenty of time to ponder my deeds since I came here. Ponder and regret. An eternity of regret. For my weakness, the Master sent me here to torture my former comrades who showed similar ingratitude for his gift of eternal life.
Mankar sends people here who are ungrateful. So is this what paradise is? Just another trial? Is this what he meant by endlessly it shall form and reform around you? Does it basically mean you shall be destroyed, as I was, until you are born anew, just as I am? Again, we see the element of twisting things around. One of the key elements to Ascend in the Elder Scrolls franchise is violence. When this violence is described, it usually takes the form of doubting, experiencing the world, dying even. As was the case with Mankar, I somehow doubt that getting tortured by Daedra is equal with the other types of violence that we've seen. But isn't that what he went through, but to a lesser extent? Wasn't he tortured by a Daedra, so much so that he went mad and then recreated himself? Even as he tells his final speech to the champion of Cyrodiil, he doesn't call Dagon's destruction actual destruction. He calls it
Refiner's Fire.
I think, if I had to put my money on anything, that Mankar genuinely believes in Mehrunes Dagon's words, but he's missing the greater picture. All of this worked on him because he had a wish, he had an ego, he had a desire, and that ego allowed him to push through and make himself anew. His followers did not, so they failed and ended up being tortured. That or he really is psychotic and or has a massive ego. And again, we see this twisting of the original desire, which was, I want people to be free, that has now resulted in all of this. That's what makes him such a good archetype for a cult leader. If you read the early writings of real cult leaders and the writings they wrote before their deaths, I swear to you, it's night and day. It always begins with something like, I just want everyone to be united. There is a lot of corruption and decadence in the world, and at the end of the day, we're all one people. And by the end, it's something like,
kill every last one of them, plunge your knife into their throats when they ain't looking, then burn to the ground. Well, that's silly, isn't it?
The Mythic Dawn cult itself is shaped exactly like those cults I just described. Instead of yapping more about this topic and what I mean by this, I have prepared a PSA presentation. So please, everyone, I hope you enjoy. I have been recording for so long that I too fear that I might grow hoarse with a script instead.
Don't you want devoted followers who leave their families for you, give their money to you, give their bodies to you, give up their lives for you, and will kill for you?
I love you.
Don't you want to become a cult leader? Since the death of God, there's been a vacancy open. You could fill that void. Here's how. Structure your cult like an onion with the most benign and helpful features on the outside and the most controlling, kooky, and evil parts at the secret inner core. Use deception. Don't tell them who you really are. Lie. Leave out important information or distort information.
Are you trying to recruit me? No. I'm just trying to share something meaningful with you.
Establish front groups.
We're a Bible study group.
We're a management course. We're a meditation center.
We're a world peace organization.
We're a personal development center.
We're a drug rehab center.
Control their behavior.
Come live with us.
Wear these clothes.
Rewrite the past as terrible, even if it was great. Tighten your group's bond by establishing scapegoats and enemies. Demonize outsiders as less than human, biased, corrupt, or conspiring against the group. Develop an us versus them mentality. Make it easier for them to die for you by calling their bodies containers that are shed before they evolve into higher life forms. It's that simple. Now, don't you want to become a cult leader?
I love you.
The fact that this is so accurate is what gets me. One last note. I swear this is the last note, and I feel like it's another thing that has to be mentioned because it really makes me appreciate the Mythic Dawn as a cult. A key characteristic of many, if not all real-life cults, is that they claim to be a remedy to the decadence of the world. Oh, look at how horrible the world is right now. Surely everything would be so much better if we all believed in a beautiful set of ideas that would fix the world and turn it into a beautiful place.
You are the last defender of decadent Tamriel. I am the midwife of the Mythic Dawn, Tamriel Reborn.
This rejection of the decadence of the world in favor of a set of beliefs that seems to be, on the surface, a better alternative to the current state of affairs is how cults and other harmful organizations attract members and support. But are these structures really the solution? Or are they equally flawed and decadent but just haven't been given enough power and attention to show their real colors? Let us explore the answer to this question in the second commentary on the Mysterium Xarxes, where we will read a story about what happens when one such organization gains enough power and what it does with it.
Whosoever findeth this document, I call him brother. Answers are liberations. Were the slaves of Malbioj that came to know Numantia cast down their jailer King Maztiak, which the Xarxes Mysterium calls the Arcane. Maztiak, whose carcass was dragged through the streets by his own bone walkers, and whose flesh was opened on the rocks thereon, and those angels who loved him no longer did drink from his honeyed ichors, screaming, "Let all know free will, and do as they will." Your coming was foretold, my brother, by the Lord Dagon in his book of razors. You are to come as idols drop away from you one by one. You are exalted in eyes that have not yet set on you. You, Swain to well traveled to shatterer of mantles. You, brother, are to sit with me in paradise and be released of all unknowns. Indeed, I shall show you his book and its foul and many-feathered rubric so that you can put into symbols what you already know. The sphere of destruction is but the milk of the unenslaved. I fault not your stumbling, for they are expected and given grace by the oils. I crave not your downfalls, though without them you might surpass me even in the coming earth of all infinities. Lord Dagon wishes you no ills, but the momentous. And as he wants, you must want. And so learn from the pages of God this, the ritual of want. Whisper to earth and earth, where the middlers take no stones except to blood, as blood is blood, and to the cracking of bone, as bone is bone, and so to crack and answer and fall before the one and one. I call you dragon as brother and king. Hides of Dra, 7 and 7, draught of oil, 1 and 1, circles drawn by wet Dibalites, 3 concentric, and let their lower blood fall where it may, a bird watched by blackbirds. Hearth fire first, and cant the following when your hearing becomes blurred. Enraptured he who finally goes unrecorded, recorded the slaves that without knowing turn the wheel, enslaved all the children of the Orbis as it is.
The Daedric word for the second book is Aldadun, which means weapon, and we will see immediately that Mankar's perception towards the reader has changed. It goes from novitiate to brother. But what lies beyond this sentence, which makes one a brother, and what follows after this simple statement, is in my opinion the most beautiful, well thought out paragraph in this entire video. Answers our liberations, where the slaves of Malbioj that came to know Numantia cast down their jailer king, Mazdiak, which the Xarxes Mysterium calls the Arcane. Mazdiak, whose carcass was dragged through the streets by his own bonewalkers, and whose flesh was open on rocks thereon, and those angels who loved him no longer did drink from his honeyed ichors, screaming, "Let all know free will, and do as they will." This changes everything. I will explain it in full, but it's kinda complicated, and not the whole answer is found within this book. Funny enough, this book only tells us the middle point of the story I just read, but in order to explain even that, something else must be explained first. Everything in the commentaries that possesses a corporeal or physical body is referred by its actual name. Everything that is a force, an energy, or an incorporeal concept is referred to as a the or they. For now, we have encountered Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric prince, but in commentary 4, we will see him being referred to as Mehrunes the Razor, the idea that would come to be Mehrunes Dagon. We will also see the same pronouns being used in the same fashion with Mnemoli in commentary 3. Now we see this pattern with Arche. Arche, right now, is incorporeal, which is why he refers to him as the Arcane. But once, he did have a body. He was corporeal. His name back then was Mazdiak. The information needed to understand everything that is going on here is only revealed to us in commentary 4, as well as some other texts that we will get to when we get there. But I will reference a tiny bit of that information here so that you can understand what's going on. Malbioj is a place in League, which is the previous version of Tamriel. In the previous Kalpa, Kalpa being a cycle of creation, what resets the Kalpa is Alduin appearing and eating the world so that it may begin anew. So how can Arche be in a previous Kalpa, and how can he be called Mazdiak? We learn the answer to this question from another book in Oblivion, a book that the moment I say its name, I just know that all of you are gonna let out an audible, huh? Because the book that answers this question is The Song of Pelenol, Volume 8. When Pelenol Whitestrake, an avatar of the god Shazar, comes to visit Alessia in her deathbed, he says the following before she dies: "Let us now take you up. We will show our true faces, which eat one another in amnesia each age. The arcane, that which Arche and Mazdiak stand for, is reoccurring in each age. So is he, but he will never know that. How Lorca knows this is anyone's guess. He's heavily associated with League, which Malbioj is located in. So Mazdiak is a jailer king in some place in League during the previous Kalpa, until at some point something happens. We don't know yet what it is, but Mankar says that answers are liberations. He describes a scene where the slaves of this place, Malbioj, came to know Numantia, the new law, and upon doing so, they casted away Mazdiak, the arcane, the embodiment of the very concept of life and death. Mazdiak is then brutally murdered and betrayed, even by his most loyal followers, and those who carried his will, his angels. Those angels once drank from his honeyed ichors, which is a vile pus generated from wounds and sores, but Mazdiak's was honeyed, so they drank from it, thinking it was delicious, maybe even healthy, but now they have killed him, and while killing him, they shouted, "Let all know free will, and do as they will," which is a very Crowley-esque line, by the way. They rebelled against the very concept of life and death, and the one that embodied it, so they killed him and rejected what he offered them. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, everything I just told you is a complete lie. Let us read between the lines just a bit. All of this comes from a guy who believes in a god who thinks that this is the ideal state of being. A guy who, above everything else, wants everyone to be free from the world around them, and anything that opposes his goal should die. We also know that Malbioj is a parallel version of Tamriel, which means that they can't be that different. So here is the same story from a different perspective. The people of Malbioj lived what we would call regular lives. They had many leaders, and one of them was named Mazdiak, who, exactly like Arkay in this Kalpa, comforted them and gave them solace when they had to face the cycle of life and death. One day, something happens, and they become aware that mortality is an option, and all their suffering can end should they just rebel against the very idea of life and death. And they do that, and in doing so, they destroy everything. Mazdiak was never a jailer king. At least he isn't a jailer any more than Akatosh or Arkay right now are jailers. He was seen as a jailer by his angels who revolted against him, the people who rebelled against him, and Mankar, and he didn't give them honeyed pus to drink. He gave them something to comfort them through their mortal lives. This liquid symbolizes the very process of life and death, and we will encounter this liquid again later, but nevertheless, they killed him. Notice the deception. It's so easy to get lost in what Mankar is saying here because of how beautifully he describes the process of basically butchering someone and then violating their carcass. But even if the second theory is true, does it matter? Depending on perspective, even if everything about Malbioj was fine and it was just a normal place, much like Tamriel, it can still be hell. You are born, you live, and then you die. And you get to do this over and over again until a black dragon appears and knocks on your door, and then poof, it was all for nothing. Need more proof? Malbioj is a metaphor for the word Male bulge, which is the 8th circle of hell in Dante's Inferno. These are the two theories about Malbioj. Personally, I lean towards the second. It just makes more sense, and it gives Mankar's character and Leeks a lot more depth. Everything said from this point onward builds up or elaborates on what this story is trying to tell, but we will not encounter this story again until commentary 4. Then he gasses up the reader just a bit more. Sure, why not? You are to come as idols drop away from you, one by one. Basically, all the false gods, the Aedra, will drop away from you. You are exalted in eyes that have not yet set on you. You, swain to well travel, to shatterer of mantles. Essentially, you will rise to a rank above others through your interactions with Dagon or Mankar, maybe even both. Swain is an archaic word for a young person born in the countryside. So you will go from a young person who's exploring the world and themselves, and then you will shatter the mantle given to you by your parents, or the one given to you by the world around you. Then he says once again that you will go with him to paradise. But notice the word in here, released of all unknowns. Isn't this the same idea that we discussed when we discussed about the Mysterium Xarxes and where that term originates from? Are these unknowns the unknowns Xarxes has, or the unknowns he has kept from us? Given his excessive beef with the Aedra, and given that Xarxes is an Aedra, I lean towards the latter. Again, the following sentence after that doesn't say anything new. He will show you the Mysterium Xarxes, and you will use destruction as an instrument of freeing yourself. He says it in a very nice way though, so I'll give him points. I just wish he wasn't literally promoting something terrible. I fault not your stumblings, for they are expected, and given grace by the oils. I I crave not your downfalls, though without them you might surpass me even in the coming earth of all infinities. I already talked about this point during the last commentary. He knows that stuff like doubt, mistakes, imperfections are essential in becoming something new, so he doesn't hate it, but at the same time he takes no pleasure from watching people fail. He's also very honest at times. Without your mistakes, you might become better than me, which I'm not very happy about, but at the same time I do wish what's best for you. Oils, obviously, don't stand for actual oils. The word is even capitalized. I think that it means that your mistakes will not define you. They are here to make you a better person, just how, say, oil stokes up a fire. The earth of all infinities is the earth before the convention, by the way, before the rules of the world were set and linear time was established. Lord Dagon wishes you no ills but the momentous, and as he wants, you must want, and so learn from the pages of God this, the ritual of want. Now this is where it once again gets exciting. He says that Lord Dagon only wishes for someone to be harmed by things that will make you a better person. Is this true? No. My money is on no. Then he says that we must want what Lord Dagon wants. Now this changes a lot. So far, he has only given us means to get something. Tools, not actual concrete desires to aim for. Unlike Vivek, who cannot stop talking about towers and true wheels and wants, Mankar so far has hardly mentioned any of these concepts. But all this has now changed. Wanting, coveting something, the process of obtaining something you want isn't just the fulfillment of a desire. When you want as Lord Dagon wants, I keep calling him Lord. This is what Oblivion has done to me. When you desire what Dagon wants, you grow closer to him. So what is the ritual of want? Whisper to earth and earth, where the meddlers take no stones except to blood, as blood is blood, and to the cracking of bone, as bone is bone, and so to crack and answer and fall before the one and one. I call you dragon as brother and king. This line is taken from an out-of-game text called The Trial of Vivek, as in Vivek says this exact same thing. This isn't Vivek's episode though. He has already had his video. What Mankar describes here is the process by which he became Dragonborn and royalty. You must tell your desires to the very world. Doing so changes your very understanding of these concepts. A stone is no longer just a stone. It is the very blood given by those who created the world. Lorkhan's blood, Akatosh's blood, the Aedra's, and, because it's Mankar, it can even be the blood of Dagon. Remember that Martin wanted the blood of both Aedra and Aedra, which can be found in Daedric artifacts, to create a portal to Mankar's paradise. In the case of Mankar, however, it is the Amulet of Kings. The bones that you have to crack are the earth bones, the very materials given to the earth by the spirits that gave their power to create the world. So again, just destroy stuff. That's what Dagon wants, and that's what you should want. If you want to become like Dagon, and like Mankar, the crack and answer and fall before the one and one can mean a whole host of things. I feel like it's him trying to tell us, as clear as he can, the process to gain Kim in his own mind. He will do this again later on, but this is his first direct attempt. First, you have to destroy stuff, including yourself. Basically, answer whatever question you may have about yourself and the world, then fall. This could be something like dying or submitting to your own undoing, and then those contradicting elements of yourself that are still you, as in your prodonymic and your neonymic, the one and one will make you a ruler. This is just my take on it though. Heights of Dreg, 7 and 7, Draft of Oil, 1 and 1, Circles drawn by wet Dibalites, 3 concentric, and let their lower blood fall where it may. A birth watched by blackbirds. Hearthfire first. So I talked already about the lesser key of King Solomon. I think this passage mirrors some of the incantations / rituals or even preparations for rituals found within that book. That book is filled with different ingredients, chants, symbolic numbers used to determine the quantity of items that are needed for rituals, and yes, a specific date and location can impact the quality of the ritual. Hearthfire first is a date. You know what? I just realized that I'm talking about this as if this is real. I'm sorry everyone. The lesser key of King Solomon is a scam. It is my 5th time trying to summon a cacodemon, and so far all I have gotten is just a bunch of Hell Knights. Oh well. What surprises me is that he acts as if this ritual is a birth, even going as far as to say that this birth is watched by blackbirds. Listen, this video is filled with moments that are just just me saying, we're gonna talk about this later. I'm done. I don't care if this comes up in an hour from now. I'm just gonna jump forward. Because there is a good chance that here he is referring to the way one of his children was made. Mankar Camoran has two children, Ruma Camoran and Raven Camoran. The only other reference we get for blackbirds is in the next commentary when he talks about his daughter. I don't know which one's birth this is. I would guess it's Ruma's because later he hints at a different explanation for Raven. We will get to some more theories about how his children came to be in the next commentary. The mention of DALAEs is also a weird addition. The first time I read this line, I thought something like, okay, he's just saying that the world is going in circles because people keep giving themselves to concepts like the ones DALAE stands for. But I don't think that that is the case now. It is more likely that he's talking about a ritual that needs to be performed where followers of DALAE have to be sacrificed inside circles like the ones found in the Mysterium Xarxes. By killing said DALAEs, the ritual is completed. The way he describes it, it seems very alchemical, as if he is describing the principle of equivalent exchange, but within a ritual, which would again make some sense. Kill a bunch of people to gain another. It seems that the same twisting he applies in making people ascend also applies to concepts like reproduction. He's not above sacrificing people, by the way. Remember the Argonian from the Dagon Shrine? My personal bet is that this is the ritual he performed to create one of his children, most possibly his daughter, or rather the first iteration of his daughter. We will get to the details in the next commentary. And this book closes with the following lines: incant the following when your hearing becomes blurred. So we can see the same pattern of guiding the reader to perform a ritual, but this time it is a form of incantation to guide his followers when they lose their way or stop listening to what he has to say. For whatever reason, maybe they are beginning to overly doubt him, maybe they are starting to feel the effects of madness, just how he did, or maybe this whole destruction thing is a bit too painful. The incantation he gives goes as follows: enraptured, he who finally goes unrecorded. Recorded, the slaves that without knowing turn the wheel. Enslaved, all the children of the Orbis, as it is. This might be a callback to how he ascended, or it might even be a reference to how Lorcan went unrecorded. What these lines say is, after you gain Numantia, you will go hidden by the rest of the world, and that's a good thing. Recorded are those who, with their actions, continue to turn the wheel. The wheel is just another way of saying the Orbis, the entire universe, and the mortals who are recorded in that universe are slaves. That's right, all the children of the Orbis are slaves in the current state of affairs. In what is considered a Kotho channel first and only, I shall allow Ithelia to explain the concept of the slaves, because this is the one good thing Ithelia has ever said.
Mortals are servants performing tasks to maintain reality. Every field plowed, child born, or war fought keeps the Orbis stable by design. This fact is kept from them. The slaves should not understand the Master's plan, lest they seek to undo them.
I am so happy for her. I could go into the metaphysics of exactly how that happens in this world, and the Prolix Tower and the Scarab and perceptions defining reality, but that already comes up in the next book. So take it in good faith, for now, that Ithelia is spitting facts. This mentality of after gaining Numantia, you become unrecorded can also be seen in Talos after he ascended. It seems that ascending above the world makes you isolated from it. You're just kinda your own thing, maybe even in your own paradise, and that was book 2. We already talked about Malbioj standing for the 8th circle of hell and the ritual tutorial Mankar gives us, so I want to focus more on the process that Mankar keeps going on about. The rough TLDR of this process is this: you begin as a normal human with a basic understanding of the world, but still possessing unmet desires and certain traits given by your ancestors. For Mankar, that was his dream, being free from everything and telling others to do the same, and also having humility in this endeavor. Then you learn something and you are driven to your limits, and from that point you undergo a process of pain, madness, even death, and then you are born again, new and better, yet still retaining your old self as well. Under this new identity, the world around you gains new meaning. Terms like blood and bones mean new things. and your desires also change. I find concepts such as things meaning different things during a period of mental development, and more important to this video, returning to a state that existed before your birth or even your childhood, fascinating, because it's one of those things that keeps popping up in different, seemingly disconnected traditions. Buddhism in particular talks about this concept the most. There are so many proverbs relating to this concept that we would be here all day if I started. I guess one that encapsulates the meaning of what is being said here is the one said by
清源
Before enlightenment, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. During practice, mountains are not mountains and rivers are not rivers. After enlightenment, mountains are again mountains and rivers are again rivers. Blood is blood, a river is a river, you get it. I also found it interesting how this concept is also found in Christianity to a lesser extent, and it mostly just stands for innocent at heart. Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. There is also an apocryphal Christian book, a lot more on those with the next book, called the Gospel of Thomas, which has a bunch of quotes that supposedly Jesus said. And I have to put a particular asterisk on supposedly, because apocryphon means that it's not an actual part of the New Testament. Most apocryphal texts say wildly different things. I would say that around 60% of the stuff in the Gospel of Thomas can also be found in the New Testament, albeit some are worded a bit differently, and a lot of the ones that aren't in the actual Bible are nothing revolutionary, but there are some quotes that are kinda out there, and I quote directly from it. Well, not directly, the originals were written in ancient Greek. I quote from the translation. Jesus said, "Have you discovered the beginning then, so that you are seeking the end? For where the beginning is, the end will be. Blessed is one who stands at the beginning. That one will know the end, and will not taste death. Blessed is one who came into being before coming into being." Okay, so far I've only been talking about broad concepts. These are good and all, but how about we talk about something that mirrors what Mankar is saying almost word for word? Not that the concepts here don't mirror what Mankar is saying pretty closely, but how about we get something even more concrete? Life being split into several stages was one of the core ideas of Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung. One of the transitional points in life that he identified through his own experience was entering the second half of life. Sometime after 1913, he experienced what he dubbed as a creative illness, the symptoms of which bear a striking resemblance to psychosis or even possibly dissociation. In that time period, this was everything but uncommon, as the outbreak of the First World War left many people at a state of unease, especially people who concern themselves with the growing field of psychology. Even Sigmund Freud reported a similar shifting of moods, though because the field of mental analysis back then was still in its infancy, diagnoses often varied from outdated ones to outright harmful ones. Jung himself by this point was a distinguished psychiatrist. Now his multiple dreams and conditions extend beyond what this video is about. What I am here to read to you is what he said after overcoming this illness. Whatever it was, he said this: "It was only after the illness that I understood how important it is to affirm one's own destiny. In this way, we forge an ego that does not break down when incomprehensible things happen. An ego that endures the truth, and that is capable of coping with the world and with fate. Then to experience defeat is to experience victory. Nothing is disturbed, neither inwardly nor outwardly, for one's own continuity has withstood the current of life and of time. But that can come to pass only when one does not meddle inquisitively with the workings of fate. I have also realized that one must accept the thoughts that go on within oneself of their own accord as part of one's reality. The categories of truth and false are, of course, always present, but because they are not binding, they take second place. The presence of thoughts is more important than our subjective judgment of them, but neither must these judgments be suppressed, for they also are existent thoughts which are part of our wholeness. So there are two halves of life. The first one is defined by forming an ego that is secure, important, yet superficial, and one might also argue unwise. And then something happens, suffering occurs, and you enter the second half of life, where all the things you just described occur, which sounds a lot like what Mankar is talking about, especially during the first commentary. Now, do I think the writer of Mankar, whomever he is, had this idea in mind? I don't know. I'm not in anyone's head. In this way, protonymic means basic in the first half of life. When he calls the Hydra first causes, I think this is what he's referring to. The Aedra promote and deify traits found in the first half of life. Traits that, although necessary, are fundamentally flawed and do not allow the ascension of the individual.
What are scholarship, love, and mercy when compared to fate, night, and destruction? The gods you worship are trifling shadows of first causes.
The Aedra represent unrefined concepts, old ones. In short, yeah, love, mercy, scholarship are important terms, but they are basic, superficial. They do not generate an evolution of consciousness the same way that concepts like fate, destruction, and yes, even madness do. If you listen to the Aedra, you will never ascend. At best, at the very best, you get to die happy, yet unwise. This is what he means with his speech back in Paradise. In my opinion, Your Honor, how can it be slander if my client stated that it's their own opinion? We will see how all of this happened according to him and what are his key problems with the Aedra in Book 3.
The tower touches all the mantles of heaven, brother, sister novitiates, and by its apex, one can be as he or she will, more, be as he or she was and yet changed for all else on that path for those that walk after. This is the third key of Numantia, and the secret of how mortals become makers, and makers back to mortals. The bones of the wheel need their flesh, and that is mankind's heirloom. Oath breakers beware, for their traitors run through the mnemic paths, runner dogs of prolix gods. The dragon's blood have hidden ascension in 6,000 years of ethereal labyrinth, which is arena, which they yet deny is oath-bound. By the book, take this key and pierce the divine shell that encloses the mantle takers, the skin of gold, scarab eye orbex. Woe to the oath breakers of the skin of gold. The Xarxes Mysterium says, be fooled not by the forlorn that ride astray the roadway, for they lost faith, and this losing was caused by the Aedra, who would know no other planets, whereby the words of Lord Dagon instructs us to destroy these faithless, eat or bleed dry the forlorn, and gain that small will that led them to walk the path of Godhead at the first, spit out or burn to the side which made them delay. Know them as the Nemeli. Every new limb is paid for by the underknown. See, brother, sister, and give not more to the Hydra. Reader, you will sense a shadow choir soon. The room you are in right now will grow eyes and voices. The candle or spell light you read this by will become gateways for the traitors I have mentioned. Scorn them and fear not. Call them names, call out their base natures. I, the Mankar of stars, am with you, and I come to take you to my paradise, where the tower traitors shall hang on glass racks, until they smile with the new revolution. That is your ward against the Nemeli. They run blue, through noise and shine only when the earth trembles with the eruption of the newly mantled. Tell them, go, Gartok al-Nem, God has come, Numimora, Num DALAE Nem. Once you walk in the mythic, it surrenders its power to you. Myth is nothing more than first once. Unutterable truth. Ponder this while searching for the fourth key. Understood laws of the arcanature will fall away like heat. First tower dictate, render the mutant bound, where he may do no more harm. As god of the Mundus, alike shall be his progeny, split from their divine sparks. We are 8 times 8 exarchs. Let the home of Padme see us as sole exit. Chim, those who know it can reshape the land. Witness the home of the Red King once jungled. He that enters paradise enters his own mother. I, Almaruma, the Orbis endeth in all ways. Endeth we seek through our dawn, all endeth. Falter now and become one with the wayside orphans that feed me. Follow and I shall adore you from inside. My first daughter ran from the Dagonite road. Her name was Ruma, and I ate her with no bread and made another, which learned, and I loved that one. And blackbirds formed her twin behind all time. Starlight is your mantle, brother, sister. Wear it, to see by and add its light to paradise.
Book 3 is the second rarest book in the Mythic Dawn cult. It is so rare that even the Mages Guild does not have a copy of it. As a matter of fact, it's so rare that not a single copy exists in the entirety of Valenwood, so I would have had to travel all the way to the Imperial City to get a copy specially commissioned for him by the bookseller in the Imperial City. All of this to say, the knowledge contained within this thing is not accessible to the public, or rather the common public, and no wonder, as the Deitric word spelled on this one quite literally means Kim. This one, more than any other, talks about Elder Scrolls lore in general, not just about a topic or a time period, but it talks about the world and its metaphysics as a whole, and it does so right away, as it begins with this: the tower touches all the mantles of heaven, brother Noviets, and by its apex one can be as he will. The tower here simply stands for one's will, that will that becomes a desire, which then becomes action, and when that I reaches a certain apex, its true form, one becomes as he will. Very Aleister Crowley-esque. Essentially, you will become what you want to. More, be as he was, yet change for all else on that path, for those that walk after. A lot of this book is spent talking about Lorcan, the deity that created the mortal realm at the expense of his own life. What is said here applies to him, but it also applies to Mankar. When you find your will and you pursue it, you will change the process for those that walk after you, who also seek to do the same. Would Mankar's followers acted the way they did if Mankar never existed? Would people have a chance to experience mortality had it not been for Lorcan? No. This is the third key of Numantia, and the secret of how mortals become makers, and makers back to mortals. The bones of the wheel need their flesh, and that is mankind's heirloom. We see this concept coming up time and time again, where people and deities keep changing in order to become new and better versions of themselves. Mankar was a mortal that became a maker by creating his own paradise. Lorcan was a spirit that became a maker, and then again, from being a mortal, he became a maker by becoming Talos, or rather, Talos became him. So, what do mortals have over the Aedra? The Aedra might be the bones of the world, which is the wheel, due to them giving their powers to create the world, but mortals are its flesh. Without it, they're just naked bones. What would Arche be if there was no mortality to require guidance during life and death? What would Mara or Debella be if there were no mortals to generate the concepts that they stand for? They would be nothing. This is why mankind, according to Mankar, is more important and better than the actual gods. And the Festival of Unknown Terms continues with the following verses: Oathbreakers beware, for their traitors run through the Nymic paths, runners dogs of prolix gods. A lot of this commentary also revolves around the 6 walking ways, which I have already made a video on, and Mankar is featured quite a lot in that video. The Aedra don't actually exist if they are not spoken into existence. Arche is a force that manifests itself with the needs and beliefs of the people about the idea of the circle of life and death. He is Arche, Orche, Tuaka, and even Mazdiak, depending on those needs and perceptions. This idea that perception and knowledge shape the world is called the Prolix Tower. Thus the Aedra are prolixed gods. The Oath is the deal the Aedra made on top of the Adamantine Tower, where they decided the laws of Mundus. Oath breakers are the destroyers who, in their attempts to gain true freedom, seek to destroy that oath. Those people have to contest the Aedra who betrayed Lorcan and their mortal servants, be they their faithful or even the clergy of the Aedra. What follows after this is, in my opinion, the most important words to understanding Mankar's perspective. In all these books, each shows his issue with the Septems, the Aedra, and especially Akatosh, who is the very concept of linear time. The Dragon's Blood have hidden ascension in 6,000 years of ethereal labyrinth, which is Arena, which they yet deny is oathbound. Akatosh, by banishing Lorcan and forcing everyone into this flawed creation, and then giving it a single linear time, has created an arena, a world of violence, pain, slavery, and ultimately death. And now he denies the very existence of the side effects of the decisions that were made by the Aedra. People have forgotten what is freedom and what this world was originally about. And what was this world originally about? And what should be done to the status quo? Buy the book. Take this key and pierce the divine shell that encloses the mantle takers, the skin of gold. The Aedra have hijacked Lorcan's plans to give everyone a chance to ascend, and they still do so actively. They have taken the mantle mantle given to humanity by Lorcan, the promise that this world was created so that beings can be something more than just spirits in stasis, and for this, the barrier between the mortal world and Aetherius must be destroyed, and they must answer for their crimes, just how Mazdiak once did, no matter how violent, bloody, or gruesome it gets. I think Skin of Gold refers to the barrier that separates Aetherius from Oblivion and Nirn, but if he is referring to the stolen mantle itself, then it would instead stand for the stolen knowledge that was lost to humanity by the actions of the Aedra. Then Mankar proclaims what this world is really all about. Scarab e Orbex. The Scarab is the Orbis. The Scarab stands for Lorcan, and he's called a Scarab because he lowered himself, basically getting lost in the world he created in order to become something more later on. Nevertheless, he and his mantle are the Orbis, not whatever the Aedra stand for. Yet at the same time, Mankar is not gonna give false hopes. He knows better than anyone that the road of the Scarab is painful, so he tells those that want to break the oath, woe to the oath breakers. Here he might also be referring to the Aedra, who according to him betrayed Lorcan, and by doing so also betraying the original plan for the Orbis, and then coming up with their own oath. And then he supposedly quotes what the Mysterium Xarxes, Mehrunes Dagon, has to say about the Skin of Gold. Be fooled not by the forlorn that ride astray the roadway, for they lost faith, and this losing was caused by the Aedra, who know no other planets. Forlorn means pitifully sad and abandoned or lonely. Essentially, if this arena has been reduced to this mess because of all the miseries brought forth by the Aedra and the ideas that they stand for, what chance does a reader of the Mythic Dawn commentaries actually have? Don't be fooled by this logic. If you disobey the Aedra, who created these circumstances to begin with, you can defeat them. And why did the Aedra do this? The Aedra too, much like the Daedra, believe that the qualities that they represent are the better ones, and in doing so, they abolished all other worlds that can exist, all other timelines, and all other planets, no matter whether someone wants them to exist or not. They just won't have it, and for that, Mankar goes full mask off, whereby the words of Lord Dagon instructs us to destroy these faithless. Killing the Aedra isn't enough. You must also kill their servants, the clergy. You might have forgotten, but the Argonian the champion of Citadel was supposed to kill in order to enter the Mythic Dawn was a priest of Arche. Not for me though. I always keep that little fella alive.
I am a priest in the Temple of the One in the Imperial City.
But then you might ask, what about Lorcan? Why is he getting a pass? In fact, he called them more than anyone. Why is he shown preferential treatment over the other Aedra? Well, Mankar has his own way for dealing with Lorcan. Eat or bleed dry the gone forlorn, and gain that small will that led them to walk the path of Godhead at the first. Spit out or burn to the side that which made them delay. The gone forlorn is Lorcan. Basically, learn from him, study him, obtain his wisdom, but don't worship him either. Use him for what he's worth, spit out what led to him failing in the end, and then just let him be. He's already dead. He isn't a deity to worship either. He's a tool to use and a case study on how to act and how not to act when pursuing Numantia. So what is it that made Lorcan delay and ultimately led to his failure? Mnemoli. Notice again how both Lorcan and Mnemoli are described using the and them. Both are incorporeal unless Lorcan decides not to be, so he uses these terms instead. So why is Mnemoli getting dragged into this? There are a number of ways to interpret Mnemoli's involvement in all of this. One thing about Mnemoli, and something that I forgot to mention in the Coda video as well as the Vivek video, it's hinted without saying that Mnemoli is the daughter of Sothasil, whom he originally called Memory. She's also associated with untimely events, including dragon breaks. On the book The Nine Coruscations, it mentions the following about Mnemoli, and I quote, "The blue star, the reclusive princess, retroactively constructed by the named her memory, appears when the dragon, Untime, frozen moments of unfettered destiny, Unbound Time, gives way, Dragon Break, as it was in the dawn, endless possibility, rewritten narratives, even the Elder Scrolls, always there is born a prisoner, unbound, as is the will of the Prime. There is no right lesson, learned alone." You know what else is found in the 37th Sermon of Vivek? The exact same quote, Mnemoli, and for that, all the Magnangi are forces that enable transitioning from one state to another. And yes, That does include Numantia. Mnemoli enabled Vivek's ascension. Even Meridia, the Aedra that became a Daedra, embodies this mentality. And as we will see in the next book, they also enabled something that led to a much greater transition. So why is Mnemoli scorned here if she does lead to ascension, like she did during Vivek's ascension? Remember, Mnemoli enabled the unmaking of Vivek so he can become something better. Throughout these books, it might seem that Mankar has this ascension thing figured out, and he does have it figured out more than most people, but does he understand it completely? No, no, no and no. A key part of ascension that we talked about when we talked about Vivek was the concept of love. Tell me, oh dear viewer, it has been how many hours since you clicked on this video? Have you ever heard Mankar loving anything that isn't freedom and his definition of liberty, or even anything that isn't directly adjacent to him? These concepts and nothing else. And what did Mnemoli tell Vivek? There is no right lesson learned alone. This is a lesson which Lord Khan heeded, and in doing so, he changed course. Mankar could never realize this. As further proof, remember that Mankar could change himself, and he can also create his own paradise, but he could never change the world around him, unlike Talos, who could do just that. We will see in the next book what is the deal with Lord Khan, the Magna Gi, and Lig. Every new limb is paid for by the unknown. See, brother, and give no more to the Hydra. These two lines, I'm not very sure about. I have a theory, and you're gonna have to bear with me. It makes sense, but oh boy, is it a doozy one. Look at this statue. It's Akatosh. It has two heads. One is the head of a dragon. Ah, yes. A Hydra. The second line is Mankar telling people to stop caring about Akatosh and his laws of linear time. Don't give your time to him. He's not worth it. So who is the unknown? I think, given that we just talked about Mnemoli, that it's Zero League, another Magna Gi. Mankar here is describing a being that isn't very well known, that gives flesh to those who stop existing under Akatosh's laws of time. Zero League is the Magna Gi of flesh that after the events of League ended up in the Serpent constellation, where it was so dark that she could not be seen and therefore became underknown. She also catalogs timely and untimely endeavors. Therefore, if you were to change your nature in accordance with something that doesn't exist in this timeline, she could have it ready for you. Just how Mnemoli allows the changing of someone in her own way, so does Zero League. That's my whack job theory. Moving on, and I must say, the following lines are probably my second favorite passage from the commentaries. Reader, you will sense a shadow choir soon. The room you are in right now will grow eyes and voices. The candle or spelllight you read this by will become gateways for the traitors I just mentioned. Scorn them and fear not. Call them names, call out their base natures. I, the Mankar of stars, am with you, and I come to take you to my paradise, where the tower traitors shall hang on glass racks until they smile with a new revolution. Think of what these documents are for people who read them in the universe. Let us say you found a person in the real world. That person clearly displays supernatural powers, and he wants others to also have supernatural powers along with him. And the way to get those powers is everything we have been talking about so far. Destruction, pain, madness, all that terrible stuff. Break yourself and break the gods that symbolize virtues such as love, compassion, mercy, and in destroying them, also destroy those concepts. Moreover, the god of destruction, the one who is very clearly a demon, is just a redeeming force. What would you think after learning all of this? Your heart and soul would want the opposite to be the case. Moreover, all those forces that Mankar is telling you to kick out are in your consciousness right now, and in that consciousness, they affect you. They seep into your mind and tell you that all of this is false. Mankar can be correct if love is what Mara says it is, or if my life and death is what RK says they are. These concepts personified by the traitor Aedra enter into your consciousness and tell you that this is all wrong. It's interesting how Mankar voices that calling them by their names and their natures is how to defeat them. It bears a striking resemblance to how a Daedra's name controls them, or a demon's name gives you control over them. Mankar talks about the Aedra as if they are the bad demons that cause us to suffer. tougher, and for him, they are. Here we also see another Mankarism. Notice how elegantly he refers to the process of torturing them and hanging them until they too become just like him. Surprisingly, here he says that he doesn't want to kill them like what happened to Mazdiak. He wants them to become as he is. He wants them to realize the revelation that he too has received. However, the Aedra are easy to defeat. Mnemoli is not, so he gives the reader a special word against her. We also get another part of the process of how this transformation happens from the old self to the new self. And this time, it evolves Mnemoli. They run blue through noise and shine only when the earth trembles with the eruption of the newly mantled. When the right revelation happens, the earth trembles with the eruption of those who have gained Numantia. Again, the Aedra are the bones of the earth, so the Aedra themselves are panicking. This might also be a dragon break. Guys, not everything that is untimely is called a dragon break. It can be, and Mnemoli is associated with dragon breaks, but I don't think that's the case with Mankar. I think that it was just an untimely event that altered him. I guess it can be a dragon break. Mnemoli is associated with those, but then again, he states that he doesn't want Mnemoli to show up. I prefer the term untimely event, which dragon breaks are one of, and then he tells the reader to tell Mnemoli, go Gartogal Nem, Goris Kam, Numimora, Numdali Nem. The translation to this would be something like, go Hands of Memory, Goris Kam, New Divine Knowledge, or just Divine Knowledge. It's not that clear. I don't know what the last one means. All I know is that Nu means new, and Nem stands for Mnemoli, who stands for memory. The rest is up to the comments, or editing Kotho. Hi, Editing Kotho here. According to Reddit user The Inducer, DALAE in Tibetan means ocean, so this would mean something like new oceans of memories. Whatever the case, this is just a word telling Mnemoli to kick rocks. Scram, if I hear separate ways one more time, I'm gonna turn blue myself. Then he explains more the process of obtaining Kim and its outcomes. Once you walk in the mythic, it surrenders its power to you. Myth is nothing more than first wants, unutterable truths. Ponder this while searching for the fourth key. We already know about this. When you go back to the time before the convention, you are free. You have new powers. But what about the myth? It is your first want before the Aedra polluted mortal desires with their own flawed ideas. These are the forgotten truths that are unknown to who knows. Maybe even Xarxes. Next line. First tower dictate. Render the mutant bound where he may do no more harm. As god of the Mundus, alike shall be his progeny, split from their divine sparks. We are 8 times 8 exarchs. Here Mankar attempts to quote what the Aedra have said during their convention. The mutant, Lorcan, will be bound to the mortal world. Off with his heart then. As he is the god of Mundus, so shall his progeny, the people of the Orbis, also be split from the mythic, their divine sparks. The Aedra will now be the rulers of this world. They will be its exarchs, basically its clergy. Not only that, they claim themselves as the ones that can actually lead to people's ascension, as they then say, let the home of Parome see us as sole exit. This is false. The Aedra are nothing but first causes. Death in the regime of the Aedra can only lead to becoming eternally bound to them, in Aetherius, in a state of permanent stasis without Numantia. They haven't just hijacked Lorcan's planet, they have also corrupted his ideology and mantle. Kim, those who know it can reshape the land. Witness the home of the Red King, once jungled. Now we change topics, and we also see another dimension of Mankar. He's fully aware of what Talos has done, and how his powers work, as Talos deleted the jungles of Cyrodiil after the Battle of Eleanor. So this might be something that confirms to him why he is right in what he does. Because think about it, Talos isn't doing anything to stop him, therefore the Septems have to be corrupt, so he must be right. Well, this line of thought isn't exactly wrong. Talos at this point just wants change to happen. He even said that much to the Nerevarine, and Mankar is doing a damn good job at that. But the Septems are only corrupt if you view them as a vehicle that enables stasis. What else is there to say about Kim? Nothing we haven't said already. He that enters paradise enters his own mother. E Almaruma, the Orbis endeth in all ways. Endeth we seek through a dawn, all endeth. E Almaruma means I am the mother of Ruma, who is his daughter. I would say he either created Ruma through a ritual, or he spawned her into existence, just how he created paradise. Here is a question: if you destroy yourself and then remake yourself through all of this, aren't you technically your own mother? Thank you. And here is your daily reminder that we're never getting writing like this ever again. The Orbis will also end. Mankar is attempting to prevent this death by decay, or death by Alduin, by restoring the dawn. And when the dawn comes, all will end and begin anew, but better. Falter now and become one with the wayside orphans that feed me. Follow and I shall adore you from inside. If after reading all of this, you still reject Mankar, then you will simply be one more of the people the mythic dawn will step on to make it to its ultimate goal. But if you follow him, he will adore you from paradise. Or you could also say that by accepting Mankar, you will forever have a part of him within your consciousness, just how it works with the Aedra. That part will always adore you. What a good man. Let us see how he treats his own daughter. My first daughter ran from the Dagonite road. Her name was Ruma, and I ate her with no bread and made another, which learned, and I love that one. And blackbirds form her twin behind all time. I'm gonna have to quote the writer of Mankar to make sense of this one, because he has said the following about Mankar and his children. Ruma gave birth to herself, and her father was her father. She also gave birth to her brother, but he's not her son. Let me be clear about something. There is no way that Mankar's children are a product of the usual way that children are made. That stuff is for Dibalites and people who worship Mara. Ew, cringe. I am like 99% sure that the ritual from the last commentary is at least how one of them was born. So Mankar makes Ruma, that is 100% confirmed. Ruma doesn't want to follow the path of Dagon. Dude, that sucks. Anyway, so he eats her. Maybe that stands for I murdered her, or I forced her into being someone else, as if he forced the whole destruction process on her, just how he himself became no more. And then he makes another one, which follows the Dagonite road. And then there are the blackbirds, which stand for Raven Camoran, which she made along with Mankar. I know this is all metaphorical, but the Sweet Home Alabama song is really ringing in my head right now. As for the details of this process, it's never made clear, and this doesn't come up again, as they all die anyway, so I don't feel like I have to push on this anymore. And this begins with this easy to understand note: starlight is your mantle, brother, wear it to see by, and add its light to paradise. By this point in our journey, we have gained a new mantle, the mantle of wanting to return to the mythic era and becoming the free beings that we once were, just like the beings that fled from the world after it was created, away from the rules of the convention, as that was how the stars were made. And this new mantle we must take, we have to take it with us to his paradise. Funny how paradise just ended up being a glorified torture chamber, and this was book 3. Not so much real life stuff, but a lot of Elder Scrolls lore, or so you have been led to believe by me. Listen, I understand that this is the third time that we have to talk about Gnosticism. It is not my fault. Don't blame me. Mankar's character was inspired by Vivex, which then inspired the kind folks at Sure AI who made Enderal. I have challenged myself to mention sources that I haven't mentioned before, so we can still have a good time. The main text for today is the Hypostasis of the Archons. Translated from Greek, this means the acts of the rulers. Gnostic myths are expansive and diverse. If it seems like I'm talking about different topics in every single one of the videos that I'm talking about this concept, it's partially because I am. Gnosticism was an off-branch of Christianity before the New Testament had been established by the first ecumenic councils. In that way, you could say it was a heresy, but that was before the main book was agreed upon, so technically, it's not. Not now though. Now it's definitely heretical. All Gnostic sources agree that the material realm, that would be our world by the way, is a flawed creation made by an ignorant god. This world we inhabit exists outside an everlasting perfection. Said ignorant god that made the world was created without the presence of the everlasting perfection. Thus it thought itself to be the one true God, which the Gnostics claimed was the God of the Old Testament. He has got many names: Demiurge, Cyclas, and many more. All these names have come to stand for ignorant ruler. This ruler is a chief among lesser divinities that are called the Archons, and they have hijacked the greater truth of the world just so they can be its divinities. And that truth is that within every human there is a spark of the everlasting divinity that we all came from. However, the Archons will never know this. They are ignorant. Because of that ignorance and their newly found autonomy and power, the entire purpose of the Archons is to gather their domain, the mortal realm, and making sure no one escapes or gains any knowledge, which is called gnosis, that would allow them to overcome the world. Because should someone do so, they will be able to change it, even so much as to overpower the Archons and ultimately ruin their dominion.
The slaves should not understand the Master's plan, lest they seek to undo them.
In Mankar's mind, the Aedra are to him what the Archons were to the Gnostics. There is also a lot of linguistic similarities, like when the hypostasis of the Archons gives its own spin to the origins of man, it mentions the spirit came forth from the adamantine land, it descended and came to dwell in him, and that man became a living soul, and the spirit called his name Adam. The adamantine land here is the everlasting perfection, so every man, according to this story, has a spark of divinity that the Archons do not, and it is in fact the Archons that claim their divinity by imposing their power and influence on mortals, and by having them call them gods. But fundamentally, humanity has more divine qualities than them, exactly what Mankar is saying about the Aedra. In the hypostasis, much like most Gnostic texts, the eating of the apple by Adam and Eve is seen as a good thing that greatly angers the rulers. Now humanity has self-awareness, now they can have the gnosis that allows them to overcome the world. So what do? They throw the first humans away from the garden, and instead they influence humanity so that they remain obsessed with them and stagnant, so that humans can never ascend beyond them. They threw human beings into a great distortion and into a life of toil, so that their human beings might be occupied with worldly affairs and might not have the opportunity of being devoted to the Holy Spirit. This is the exact claim that Mankar makes about the Aedra. Akatosh for Mankar is what the Demiurge is to the Gnostics. Another line which bears a striking similarity to what Mankar is talking about when it comes to the Aedra is this: do you think these rulers have any power over you? None of them can prevail against the root of truth, and these authorities will be restrained, and these authorities cannot defile you and that race, for your abode is in incorruptibility, where the Virgin Spirit lives, who is superior to the authorities of chaos and to their universe. I think that at the very least, this is a brilliant allegory about how Mankar keeps going on, about answers being liberations, and about how the Aedra are so weak and powerless in the end. I don't want to harp for too long on Gnosticism because I covered it already, and I'm also working on a greater project with all the occult references in the Elder Scrolls. Yeah, that video will be out in a year, but I want to finish this section with some of the final passages from the hypostasis of the Archons because they simply mirror Mankar's talking points so well. Let me just read them, and bear in mind, this is a conversation, but I said, "Sir, am I also from their matter? Their souls come from above, out of the incorruptible light. Therefore, the authorities cannot approach them, since the Spirit of truth resides in them, and all those who know this way exist, deathless, in the midst of dying people." Then I said, "Sir, how much longer?" He said to me, "Wait until the moment where the true human, within a modeled form, reveals the existence of the Spirit of truth that the Father has sent. Then they will be free of blind thought, and they will trample on death, which came from the authorities, and they will ascend into the limitless light. Then the authorities will relinquish their ages, and their angels will weep over their destruction, and their demons will lament their death." Now that you have seen this idea of destroying the world and its rulers to make something better of it, as was also the case with Mazdiak and his angels, and a real-life example of what this concept looks like, let us go and talk about the very ending of this story. Wait. You don't understand. We can't just go ahead and start talking about the fourth commentary. The fourth commentary on the Mysterium Xarxes is perhaps the most confusing book in this entire franchise. Now that is saying something. Let me tell you a few things about the making of this video. I began researching for this video in one way or another 6 months ago, and the majority of that time was spent trying to analyze the fourth commentary. I can recite commentary 4 from beginning to end from pure memory. The first thing we have to talk about is what is League, and I actually made a video about this before, and although what I said in that video is correct, I made it look confusing. That doesn't mean that this topic isn't complicated, but it can certainly be said in an easier fashion. In its most basic form, League is the multiverse theory, but actually interesting and done in a creative manner. It is a parallel version of Mundus that is adjacent to Mundus and was once the entirety of it. During the previous cycle of creation, the last Alba. See, it's not difficult. Both League and Mundus adhere to the same term, the Mandex Terrene, which we will encounter, first things first, during the 4th commentary. Both terms are adjacent to this concept, like the whole table example from earlier, or Archaea reappearing and having different forms throughout different ages, just how Pelennor talked about. Though I can assure you, during this book, we will encounter a lot more cameos of divine beings other than just Archaea. To make it even easier to understand, when Dagon talks about coming back to Nirn, he doesn't just say, when I walk the earth. He says, when I walk the earth again. He has been here before, under different circumstances. This is why Vivek describes it as the illusion of the vocal, one concept, the Mandex Terrene, that takes several forms throughout the ages. Where is it right now? It's a parallel dimension. Creatures that live in League come into our world sideways. This doesn't come up, but I find it interesting. League is a result of bending space. If you want to understand this concept through an example, I can't believe I'm gonna bring up this example, but Vsauce made a YouTube short displaying how bendable space, such as a piece of paper, can result in ending up in a different location if bended, yet still being within that space. Does this mean that there are other adjacent places beyond League? It's possible, but we only know of one map that got ruined because of a false fire alarm in the Bethesda studios that day. That was not a joke. Okay, so that's League. So now that we talked about what League is, what actually went down there? Well, this is what we are about to find out as we talk about the final Mythic Dawn commentary. May the holder of the 4th key know the heart thereby. The Mandex Terrene was once ruled over solely by the Tyrant Drake Kings, each to their own dominion, and border wars fought between their slave oceans. They were akin to the time totems of old, yet evil and full of mockery and profane powers. No one that lived did so outside of the sufferance of the dregs. I give my soul to the Magna Gi, saith the joyous in paradise, for they created Mehrunes the Razor in secret, in the very bowels of Lig, the domain of the upstart who vanishes. Though they came from diverse waters, each yet shared sole purpose, to artifice a prince of good, spinning his likeness in random swath, and imbuing him with oblivion's most precious and scarce asset, hope. Deathlessly I intone from paradise, Mehrunes the thief-taker, Mehrunes God's body, Mehrunes the red arms that went up, Numantia, liberty. Deny not that these days shall come again, my novitiates. For as Mehrunes threw down Lig and cracked his face, declaring each of the 19 and 9 and 9 oceans free, so shall he crack the serpent crown of the Cyrodiils, and make federation. All would change in these days, as it was changed in those, for with by the magic word, Numantia, a great rebellion rose up, and pulled down the towers of Kim El Karjik, and the Templars of the upstart were slaughtered, and blood fell like dew from the upper wards, down to the lowest pits, where the slaves with maniacal faces took chains and teeth to their jailers, and all hope was brushfire. Your dawn listens, my lord, let all the Orbis know itself to be free. Mehrunes is come, there is no dominion save free will. Suns were riven as your red legions moved from League to the hinterlands of Chill, a legion for each get, and Curry was thrown down, and Jaff was thrown down, and Hormagal was crushed with cold salt, and forevermore cold Hor, and so shall it be again under the time of gates. Under the mires Malbioj was thrown down, that old city of chains, slaked in newborn warmth and set free. Galg and Mogalg were thrown down together in a single night of day, and shall it be again under the time of gates. Nothing but woe for Nirn, which has become the pit, and 7 curses on its drag, the Verma and Aimoch. But for it the crusades shall be as my lord's creation. Get by the Gi and do as thou wilt, of no fetters but your own conscience. Know that your hell is broken, people of the Orbis, and praise the Numantia, which is liberty. This is the rarest one, and it's only given to people directly from the Mythic Dawn. So it's safe to say that this knowledge is known by hardly anyone, and the Daedric letters found in the beginning of this page translate to Kartok, which means hand. Let's dive into it. May the holder of the 4th key know the heart thereby. Essentially, may he who finds the 4th key find out what everything we have been talking about throughout all the commentaries has really been all about. The Mandex Terrene was once ruled over solely by the Tyrant Drake Kings, each to their own dominion, and border wars fought between their slave oceans. They were akin to the time totems of old, yet evil and full of mockery and profane powers. No one that lived did so outside of the sufferance of the dregs. So we're presented with this scene. We are no longer on the Mundus we know. We are in the previous Kalpa. The world at this time was ruled over solely by the tyrant dreg kings, who all ruled over certain dominions and waged war with each other. The world at this time was comprised mostly of oceans, and the people were enslaved. A reminder here that our narrator is still Mankar Camoran, and whatever he says about these topics should be taken with a massive grain of salt. I think it is way more likely that League was just a normal place, with wars, conflicts, and death, just how Nirn is today. But because Mankar is Mankar, this to him is basically a society of slaves. We also see how he views these forces as structures that are necessary to maintain League itself. They were the totems that held the world together. They were the towers of creation that upheld the rules of the world. But they were apparently also evil, and much like the Aedra now, according to Mankar, they mocked people with their profane powers. Everyone in League was bound to the pain inflicted upon them by these tyrant dregs. So we have this scene, again, just how Mundus is now, an adjacent image of Mundus, one might say, where forces have become deities and now they rule over the populace without any objections. We know that one of them was Arche, who back then played a most significant role and was called Mazdiak. Mazdiak seems to be for League what Akatosh is to Mundus right now. So what happened to this place? I give my soul to the Magna Gi, saith the joyous in paradise. For they created Meruns the Razor in secret, in the very bowels of League, the domain of the upstart who vanishes. Though they came from diverse waters, each get shared sole purpose, to artifice a prince of good, spinning his likeness in random swath, and imbuing him with Oblivion's most precious and scarce asset, hope. As we said already, the Magna Gi are forces that enable transcendence, and every one of those who have been to paradise has given themselves to them. Vivek, during his transformation in Sermon 37, gives himself to Nemoli and married Nunda, and their prime Archon, Ithelia, haha Archon, hated Akatosh because it prevented people from reaching Numantia. And I quote from the 9 coruscations, Akatosh's insanity is all that is and could be. By this lesson, Adamantia, stable spire fixed by a stone of nothing possible, cleaving a path through everything, and reaching Numantia. So we see that the Magna Gi are forces that at least enable transcendence from one state to another. I'm gonna give a quick rundown of each Magna Gi and what they stand for, not because it comes up too much here, but because I find it really interesting. And who wouldn't want this to be put into perspective? Hell yeah, my Magna Gi. Mnemoli, the blue star, stands for altruism. Shezarana, the cyan star, stands for relaxation and harmony. Londa Vera, the green star, stands for perfection, associated with femininity. Valia Shah, the orange star, stands for compassion, associated with sharing. Unalase, the yellow star, stands for love. Zero League, the black star, associated with flesh divinity. The prime Archon, the white star. Ithelia, associated with Numantia, which here is referred to as Numantia, strictly opposed to Akatosh's laws of time. Ithelia. When I played Ithelia's story in ESO, I thought it was the worst piece of dogshit story that I had ever played in Elder Scrolls, and I still think exactly that. But after reading almost everything that there is to read about the Magna Gi and how she was actually very well written prior to having her own chapter, I'm just sad. There is a dialogue with a Daedra called Lyrath in ESO. Well, there is a dialogue with ESO's old lore master pretending to be a Daedra called Lyranth, in which he's attempting to answer a simple question that I will now ask all of you. Did the Magna Gi create Meruns willingly or unwillingly? Lilith's answer was that Meruns is a flawed creation made by the Magna Gi in their cowardice after fleeing Mundus before the creation was fully completed in the way Magnus had envisioned. I disagree. Back to Mankar. Meruns the Razor isn't Meruns Dagon yet. It's what Meruns Dagon would go on to stand for, but right now he is incorporeal. He has no physical form. For now, it's just the idea of destruction, ambition, and change. Believe it or not, this is not the first time in this franchise that an idea, or as we will see soon, a conflict, results in the materialization of a new being. Is that a word? In the events of the Elder Scrolls Shadowkey, yes, this video took a lot of research, the main antagonist of that game, Umbraketh, was created as a result of the war between the provinces of Hammerfell, Skyrim, and High Rock. I think that the existence of the Magnangi, these ideas that promote transcendence inside League, a domain of flawed stasis, created the circumstances that led to the thoughts and perceptions that created everything that Mehrunes Dagon would stand for: revelation, ambition, and change, all in the form of Mehrunes the Razor. This is further supported by the fact that Mehrunes the Razor was created in secret in the bowels of League. The Magnangi knew what they were doing, they just had to do it in secret so that Mazdiag and the others didn't find out. But the conditions of League were such that the very bowels of League, everything that realm stood for, enabled the creation of Mehrunes the Razor. Much like Mandas, League back then was also the domain of the upstart who vanishes, Lorkhan. It seems that for Mankar, Lorkhan isn't just the ruler of Mundus, but the whole of the Mandex terrain. It could also be the case that here he's referring to Magnus, but that doesn't exactly change anything. And if I'm honest, the more I think about it, Magnus seems more likely to fit the title for the creator of an everlasting, flawed world of order who then vanishes. But Lorkhan also makes sense. And during the 9 coruscations, it is stated that he was in League. It doesn't matter that much either way, so it could be either one of the two. Apparently the Magnangi wanted to create a Prince of Good, and so they gave him something that almost didn't exist at the time: hope. What Mehrunes the Razor stood for started spreading all throughout the land. We will see what happens from here, but before that, we learn how Mehrunes eventually got a corporeal body, deathlessly intoned from paradise. Mehrunes the Thief Taker, Mehrunes God's body, Mehrunes the red arms that went up, Numantia, liberty. Much like Mankar does now, people began to worship and deify the ideas that the Magnangi promoted and imbued it in Mehrunes the Razor. They began shouting his name, and everyone who is joyous in paradise, just like Mankar is, does the same, because Mehrunes is the reason why they were able to get there, and they want others to one day join them in paradise. Mehrunes took on those who stole ascension and hid it from everyone, and the thoughts of the people about what Mehrunes the Razor should look like gives him his body and his red arms, and those prayers of what people thought when they thought of Mehrunes the Razor became reality. Those thoughts corporealized, and its purpose was to give people new laws, freedom. Mankar tells his followers in Tamriel that those days will come again, for as Mehrunes threw down League and cracked his face, declaring each of the 19 and 9 and 9 oceans free, so shall he crack the serpent crown of the Cyrodiils and make federation. All will change in these days, as it was changed in those. For with by the magic word Numantia, a great rebellion rose up and pulled down the towers of Kim El Karjik, and the Templars of the upstart were slaughtered, and blood fell like dew from the upper wards down to the lowest pits, where the slaves with maniacal faces took chains and teeth to their jailers, and all hope was brushfire. These lines begin by telling us, in simple terms, what Mehrunes' plans are. He will do the same thing that he did to League: destroy the place completely, supposedly, declare it free, and kill the Septim dynasty, the dynasty of Akatosh. And then he talks more about League and what happened there. Upon the people of League learning about Numantia through Mehrunes, a great rebellion began. In contemporary Tamriel, there exist a bunch of towers that uphold the rules of creation, and according to these words, similar towers once existed in League, but the rebellion threw them down, thus undoing the very laws of creation. Notice how these towers are described as Kim El Karjik. The amulet of kings that upholds the covenant between Alessia and Akatosh is called Kim El Adabal, the divine stone of royalty. So Kim El Karjik would mean something like the divine order of royalty. Jig is the name of Jigolak, the Daedric prince of order, and now we know his backstory. During League, he was the divine order of royalty that fell to the rebellion when the people rebelled against everything he stood for, and he became a Daedra. And a similar story also happened to someone else that you might remember from the Vivek video, and we will talk about him soon. But for the last time, I need to comment on Mankar's beautiful way of describing horrific things. The Templars of the upstart, be he Lorkhan or Magnus, were slaughtered, not killed, not executed. Their blood went everywhere, as the people, the slaves, became maniacs, and they killed them with everything they had available to them. And the more they did so, the more the rebellion grew, like a wildfire. If you weren't familiar with Mankar, you would think this war might be a righteous movement, but the more you read between the lines, the more you realize that he's describing something utterly horrific. There is a pretty grim subtext here about the rest of Tamriel and its current situation during during the time of Skyrim, and I want to do a smaller theory video following up on this one, talking about those subtexts, just to tease that video a little bit. Can you think of any order in contemporary Tamriel as of the time of Skyrim that is bitter about creation and actively seeks to undo it? Now let's go piece together a more accurate story about what happened during the rebellion from someone who is in Mankar, courtesy of the 9 coruscations. This is the description of Unala Sea. They watched as a black bile swept across the land like a sickened sea, not yet knowing that they're the tragic Prince of League, and the darkness within him poured forth from the wound, taking a life of its own in the realm. The dark encircled even the Elden King of Gracht, who seemed so steadfast, drank off the darkness and became something more. After her fall, a black tree of poison and death, she showed us that which we were meant to see, still watches, hoping we will remember love. I'm never escaping it. The tragic Prince of League is Mazdiak, and his honeyed ichors are the black bile that came from his wound, which, upon his death, spread all across the land. It entered the very soil and corrupted nature. The elder King of Gracht might be Frey, who is the very land, and when he drank the bile, he became a black, poisonous tree, and Unalasi watched all of this happen. I will manifest my inner Vivek for a moment and tell you the real problem with all of this. By killing the concept of life and death and nature, you aren't ascending above them. You are just destroying stuff, which is great if you are Mehrunes Dagon, and also if you have something like, I don't know, an ego and a deep-seated desire to replace the destroyed stuff with something new after they are gone. The Magna Gi gave people the will to ascend, but they gave them nothing worth ascending for. They have the recipe for ascension, but they lack the ingredients, so they are just stuck breaking things. Unalasi knows this, so after all of this was said and done, she waits for people to remember love so that all of this can be done correctly. Mankar could never understand this. If you remember from the last commentary, he outright advises against Hidim Nemoli, the Magna Gi that promotes altruism and the destruction of the ego. But Arke, Jigolak, and maybe Frey, this one isn't as clear as the other two, weren't the only ones that fell. Let us read the remnants of the story of Zero League to see who else fell to this rebellion. The orphan opposite into the adjacent place, and for alongside Lork within alternate worlds onto endless possibilities. King of Dreg fell to Mehrunes the Razor, was forced to the next Kalpa to spiral ever out and see the land and sky prefer to see. The rebellion led to the undoing of the King of Dreg, who back then was Molak Bal. During those days, he was the god king of the Dreg, and after he too fell to the rebellion, he was forced into the next Kalpa, where he became what we know him as today. I want to go on my own little tangent by making some more observations. Observation number 1. Okay, so we just established that Lord Khan was at League to some extent, correct? And we also established earlier that he knows that the divinities eat each other during each age, correct? Could this be why he did everything that he did? He knew that order wouldn't last anyway, so he wanted to prevent another League situation by destroying order and creating the conditions for ascension before this situation repeated itself. Second observation, we just said that a black bile flooded the land and made everything poisonous and black, right? Is this how Molak Bal went from godship of a civilized people to the god of redacted? Did this liquid maybe seep into him as well? Just a few fun observations that I picked up on. You shouldn't take them too seriously. Then he reaffirms the goal of his mission, to free the entire Orbis. The next two lines are interconnected, so I'll read them together. Suns were riven as your legions moved from League to the hinterlands of Chill, a legion for each get, and Kuri was thrown down, and Jaff was thrown down, and Hormagal was crushed with cold salt, and forevermore called Hor, and so shall it be again under the time of gates. Under the Myers, Malbioj was thrown down, that old city of chains, slaked in newborn warmth and set free. Galg and Mogalg were thrown down together in a single night of day, and so shall it be again under the time of gates. We are presented with these scenes of devastation, where the very fabric of reality is being torn apart, suns split, places get sacked, never to rise again. Malbioj was was destroyed and set on fire. As more and more locations begin to be destroyed, time begins to not work as it used to, and night and day blend together. I have spent so much time trying to find real-life equivalences as to what all of these places mean, or more information I can give about them. Apart from the fact that Horma, and Morgalk sound a lot like they have something to do with Her Mamora, I have nothing in-game. But I want to talk about the real-life influences behind the scene right now. I already talked about the symbolism of Malbioj standing for the 8th circle of hell. Continuing on with this theme of religious allegories, the way he describes the sacking of this series and the way this passage is written is very reminiscent of stories from the Old Testament, in which God caused for the destruction of entire tribes and cities: Sodom, Gomorrah, the Canaanites and the Amalekites, people and places that we know very little about. And the biggest piece of information we have about them is that apparently God destroyed them. Also, the practice of pouring salt over destroyed locations is another real-life practice, such as the myth that the Romans poured salt over the ruins of Carthage after they conquered it, so nothing will be able to grow there again, and the land becomes unsuitable for agriculture. Nothing can be known about these locations. Their destruction was complete and total. There are some tiny hints about what happened, like it mentions that the rebellion moved from League to a bunch of these places, so they could be names for different realms back then. Remember Deadlight? I am like 90% sure that one of these places is Deadlight. Also, maybe Merunce's Karen Realm of Oblivion is one of these places. I don't think that Hinterlands of Chill stands for Cold Harbor, which is more like Ball's Karen Realm of Oblivion. I think it's more so trying to say the rebellion went from sea to the northern lands. Any other information I give about any of this is definitely gonna be a scam, so I'm gonna stop talking about it. And with that, let us read the last lines of the last commentary, Nothing But Woe for Nern, which has become the pit, and 7 curses on its drag, the Vermai Naimuch, but for it the Crusades would be as my Lord's creation. I want to turn your attention to what I said about a part of Mankar's monologue when I said that it would come up in the last line of the last commentary. You couldn't possibly forget what I said 3 hours ago, did you? Let me play it again.
The principalities have sparkled as gems in the black reaches of oblivion since the first morning. Many are their names and the names of their masters. The cold harbour of Meridia, Periite's quagmire, the 10 moon shadows of Mephala and Dawn's beauty, the princedom of Lorcon, misnamed Tamriel by deluded mortals.
Why is he confusing the Daedric realms? Originally, it was a mistake. This is confirmed by the person who wrote Mankar. But he also said that other than simply calling it an error, we should go through hoops to make it make sense, since the story is already subject to unreliable narration. And I shall oblige. So what Mankar says in this line of the commentary is that Nirn has become the pit, which is Periite's realm of oblivion. Therefore, Lorcan's realm is now the pit. So which realm is Periite's? Quagmire. I propose that according to Mankar, Daedric realms are not bound to their princess, but they are bound instead to what these Daedric princes represent. Therefore, if Seimundus becomes a land of disease, miasma, decay and death, it has become the pit, as Periite is the Daedric prince of blights, and Mankar thinks that Nirn, in its current state, is full of blights. And he hates that. He has nothing but woe for what Nirn has become. He views humans who haven't ascended as basically dregs in the making. The dregs were once the inhabitants of League, which Dagon destroyed. He describes these humans as living in a nightmare. I believe that's what he means by Vermai Naimuch. Moreover, Cold Harbor is a dark and lightless place, the opposite of Meridia. But for Mankar, Meridia is just another part of the problem. Not only does she accept the concept of life and death as stated by Arcade, but she vehemently supports it, as she strongly opposes the undead. She's just another jailer, forcing people to exist under the domination of the Aedra, and for that domination, he attributes her to Cold Harbor, a lightless realm for the Daedric Prince of Domination. According to Mankar, Meridia stands for something different, therefore, the realm bound to her is a different one than the one we've come to associate with her. Not only is she a jailer, her light is false, according to him, since the only good light are the ones from Mehrunes' fires. And finally, Mankar hates the concept of destiny, fate, and predetermination.
In your coming, I hear the footsteps of fate. You are the last defender of decadent Tamriel. I am the midwife of the mythic dawn, Tamriel Reborn.
All of these things are attributed to Azura, whose realm, the 10 moon shadows, is said to be beautifully blinding, but not so much for Mankar. Therefore, that realm surely belongs to a vile Daedra of deception, lies and terror, and those are just the PG descriptions of Mafala. And there you have it. This is my solution to his Daedric realm misassignment. Because Nirn is now the pit, more people would join Mankar's cause. As you remember, decay and decadence is what cults like the Mythic Dawn feed on to gain new members. And the last commentary closes with Mankar giving his followers the exact recipe to gain Numantia. Get by the Gi and do as you will, of no shackles but your own conscience. Know that your hell is broken, people of the Orbis, and praise the Numantia, which is liberty. Give yourself to the Magna Gi and do what you will, with no obstacles but your own consciousness. Upon doing so, your hell is broken. You are no longer in the mortal realm, this nightmarish pit, as he calls it. You have achieved Numantia, which is liberty. As we enter the second to last section in this video, I want to focus on something different than what I've been covering throughout the last sections of each commentary so far. We all know how Mankar's story ended. The champion of Cyrodiil kills him, and we already spoke about why he was wrong. He had himself figured out, but he didn't understand the true form of the world, and he had no actual love. So far in these last sections, we have been talking about meditations and alchemy and religions and occult practices, but I just want to take this section and dissect a simple question. Was Mankar Camoran truly free? Because all along we've been talking about absolute freedom from everything but your own consciousness, and that is alright and all, but here is a counter argument. If you go through all this trouble just so you can rise your consciousness or your desires or your beliefs or whatever you want to call them above everything else, aren't you just a slave to your own consciousness? If his beef with the Aedra is that they wanted to know nothing else but the concepts they represent, isn't he doing the exact same? Furthermore, if you do exactly what Mankar said, haven't you enslaved other people just to get there? Didn't he force his own daughter into all of this? Maybe for Mankar, this is what he wanted. But what about the many people who like the world just the way it is, who are perfectly aware that they will suffer and die one day, but are completely fine with it because, like Mankar does, they too have desires to fulfill. And I think that, ironically, the best argument against what Mankar is saying, surprisingly, comes from Dagon himself. A question that I wanted to answer when I was making this video is, if Mankar is bound to Mehrunes Dagon, then why was he not brought back after his death? No, really. Mankar's disciples are bound to paradise and they come back. This is how soul alignment works in the Elder Scrolls universe. When you die believing in the Aedra, you go to Aetherius, or if you die believing in a certain Daedra, you go to their realm. Why was Mankar never brought back from oblivion? Because much like most things, Mehrunes Dagon doesn't care. He said something similar about another champion of his during the events of ESO.
Arise, Somren. I still have use of you.
Mehrunes Dagon doesn't care about Numantia. He's just here to break stuff. Mankar's greatest argument about why people should pursue Numantia was never because he wanted the world to be a better place. He saw the world as a flawed creation anyway. He was completely aware of what happened to League and was completely fine with the same thing happening to Tamriel. Neither did his followers care about the world. Dagon's proclamation wasn't that he would give everyone liberty. His promise was that his followers would ascend above all other mortals. Do I think that had he succeeded, he would have kept his word? Do you know what happened last time that Dagon made a deal to not destroy everything? It didn't even take him a year before he broke it. Dagon is unstable, careless, and has a single desire that he's willing to sacrifice everything in order to obtain. But at no point is he able to question why he does that. He's a slave to his own desire, which he has dubbed as a paramount liberty, not only for him, but for everyone else around him. Exactly just how Mankar thinks. And that obsession, no matter what Mankar says, makes them both slaves to that desire. As a last note, remember how Mankar wouldn't stop talking about the Aedra, who thought that their own ideals were the paramount ones? Well, in the 8th volume of the Song of Pelenol, we have this line where Pelenol is talking to Alessia in her deathbed, and left you to gather sinew with my other half, that would probably be Akatosh, who will bring light thereby to that mortal idea that brings the gods great joy, that is freedom. freedom, which the heavens do not truly know. The Aedra don't hate the concept of freedom. Much like Dagon, they're just unable to understand it. But unlike Dagon, what made them create the mortal realm, according to another text, was that they understood compromise, something that Dagon could never do. The Aedra want freedom. It brings them joy. They too, however, are bound to their nature. Therefore, Aetherius, the heavens, cannot know freedom. But still, it brings them great joy. They didn't simply betray Lorcan. If anything, they did as he wished. Lorcan doesn't even hate Akatosh. Mankar was fundamentally incorrect. And that was the story of the greatest cultist in gaming. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching this video. This video was a blast to make. The stories, the real life influences, how good Mankar is as a cult leader, and how good the Mythic Dawn is as an actual cult. This has been a ride for me. I want to give a special thank you to Frostbreak, Cayman from Difficult Gamers, and Mick Voice for helping with this video by lending their voices for the commentaries. Their channels will be in the description, so make sure to give them some love if you haven't already. I also need to thank the very patient members of the Woodlands for funding these videos. Hopefully, by the time I upload this one, I can finish making some of the first emotes for all of you, including, but not limited to, a broken sword, my beloved, the Konachrik mask, another suspicious golden mask, and whichever other meme from the channel I can think of. I hope you enjoyed this journey, by the way, and I would love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Is this channel slowly turning into a glorified literature classroom? In the description of this video, you will also find the comedic backstory of League, the Reddit post that suggested the solution for the prayer of Nemoli, the housing mod you see before you, and whatever other stuff I decide to shove down there. Is there anything else to say? Oh yeah, be on the lookout for the theory video that follows up from this one within the next 2 weeks. It builds up on stuff that I mentioned during the 4th commentary, but I didn't actually put it in here because it didn't fit the topic. And with all that said, bye byes. Truth in sequence, coming in 5 billion years.